Introduction. Is it a party in the parlor, crammed just as they on earth were crammed, some sipping punch, some sipping tea, but as you by their faces see, all silent and all damned. William Wordsworth. The Succubus Club is yet another book set in Chicago, but as opposed to focusing on the city as a whole, or on a specific story therein, this book gives us a detailed look at the most infamous nightclub in the city, and a handful of shorter stories that can take place there. First introduced in Ashes to Ashes, that book did not have the space to do justice to what would become one of the most well-known establishments in VtM, spawning follow-up books and featuring in multiple titles throughout different editions of the game. It should be noted that the name of the establishment comes from the original playtest group for the game when it was developed, who were known as the Succubus Club. Released in October 1991, the Succubus Club is unique at this point in VtM history for having a much larger number of writers working on it for this style of book, owing to the different stories that accompany the setting info, each having been written by a different person. The primary setting information and the story fundamental differences were written by Andrew Greenberg, Annabelle's Party by Graham Davis, Player of Pawns by Bill Bridges, Death's Sweet Sting by Lisa Stevens, Paper Chase by Nigel Findley, and Grand Illusions by Steve Crow. Art this time around also sees an increased number of hands and was contributed to by Janet Alizio, Josh Timbrook, Craig Cartwright, Dave Miller, Gail Van Voorhees, Bill Bridges, John Cobb, and Tony Santo. I will do my best to continue giving attribution to artists as I show the artwork from the book, but as not everyone signs their work and some of these artists I'm not as familiar with, I may get some wrong or misattribute some pieces. If so, I apologize in advance. It starts to get a bit tricky to figure out who's who with this many artists involved. As with a number of previous books, the Succubus Club can be found on DriveThruRPG in PDF format, but does not have a standalone print-on-demand option. However, it can be acquired as a POD via Chicago Chronicles Volume 1 alongside the first edition of Chicago by Night. Original copies are not difficult to find, but prices vary wildly, and even on the low end can sometimes be a bit elevated, so use some caution if hunting one. Spawned from the imaginations of the first vampire playtest chronicle, the Succubus Club was a nexus point for many of the stories told, a place of plots and schemes where young Kindred could go and be more themselves without the stuffiness of a traditional Elysium. Where blood dolls, mortals who drank blood from one another, were common, which facilitated their own ability to feed more openly. We saw only a small glimpse of the club in Ashes to Ashes, featured in a short scene before the flow of the story carried the coterie onward toward danger. From there, it was revisited for a little more detail and context within Chicago by Night, where we learned more about the workings of the club and met its proprietor, the Ventrue Brennan Thornhill, in addition to the ancient Toreador Methuselah, Helena, who once slept in its depths before awakening and taking on the guise of the neonate Portia. Here we will learn about the workings of the club in great detail, followed by a number of stories that are likely to occur within the walls of the seemingly austere building that belies the potential for chaos within its walls. I will be a bit more brief than usual in the individual stories, as these are generally only possible events set up to sell the opportunities the setting provides, more than being traditional stories, but they still provide an interesting glimpse into the nature of the Kindred of Chicago. They would be best placed as events mixed into some of the other stories set in Chicago to fill them out and help introduce various characters to the coterie. In particular, most seem likely to fit quite well between the events of Ashes to Ashes and Blood Bond, with a lot of potential for intermingling with either of those tales. There's a lot to cover here, so let's jump right in. History. The building that houses the Succubus Club has a strange and storied history, with many of the oddities surrounding it occurring due to it being the generations-long resting place of Helena. It was the first four-story warehouse built in Chicago and was constructed shortly before the Civil War. Used to store everything from wool to ammunition, each floor was accessible via a pulley and crane system in the back of the building. In 1871, it managed to survive the rampages of the Great Chicago Fire despite its downtown location. This was in no small part to the heavy concentration of firefighters who happened to focus specifically on it amidst the blaze. Afterward, the building went through a string of owners who either died under mysterious circumstances or suddenly sold the building with little reason given at drastically undervalued prices, and workers who regularly reported unnerving experiences within its walls. Sometime in the early 1900s, the building became a focal point for illegal goods during the Prohibition era and was believed to be a hideout of none other than Al Capone, and it was believed that his fabled vault was housed within. Despite the heavy rumors of the building's illicit contents, it was never raided by the police and nobody connected to the building was ever arrested. Following this era, the building stood empty for many years and ownership was unclear, and it was nearly seized by the city for unpaid taxes until a lawyer from the office of Ballard, Anderson, and Bateman paid the back taxes and the firm ultimately took control of it. Substantial profits were made on the building during World War II and they began to lease it out after 1950. Sometime in the early 1960s, the area transitioned from industrial warehouses to office spaces, storefronts, and restaurants. During this period, an attempt was made to turn the building into a restaurant known as Stonewall's, but it soon failed due to an inability to control pests and a strange penchant for odd folk to show up and sit around without eating anything, causing normal patrons to become uncomfortable. After another several years, it was renovated and turned into a rock and roll club known as the Atomic Cafe, and flourished for around 10 years before ultimately closing in 1973 due to the death of the owner. From there, it reopened as Stardust, a disco club that rose in popularity alongside the rise of disco itself, becoming an incredibly popular hotspot even amidst rumors of disappearances, assaults, and even murders taking place there. Only the death of disco itself drove it to ruin. From there, the building closed for nearly a year, during which it was heavily renovated from top to bottom, with only the dance floor and the bar remaining from Stardust's time. It was reopened on May 23, 1982, by Brennan Thornhill as the Succubus Club, now featuring a stage and maze to the basement level and knocking out most of the upper floors excepting the very top floor, which was converted into an opulent private club. The Succubus Club was an immediate hit despite controversy over the deaths of several construction workers who had worked on the basement level. It was believed that its popularity would last a year at most, but it somehow maintained its exceptional popularity into the current nights. Brennan continues to partially remodel the interior periodically, never allowing the regulars to grow bored of it. As many of you may suspect, nearly all of these strange occurrences and seeming luck the building has experienced are due almost exclusively to the presence of Helena. Menelaus suspects his ancient enemy may reside within, but his probing of the building has never been able to provide proof. Despite this, he had one of his most valued minions, Annabelle Triavel, work her way into Brennan's confidence to keep informed on what goes on there. Layout. The layout was initially described lightly in Ashes to Ashes, and I won't spend as much time as I could on this section. Just know that there's an almost tedious level of detail on how the club looks and how it functions. The club is functionally split into 3 sections that give the impression of entirely different clubs. There are the basement area, known as the Labyrinth, owing in part to the maze that is present there, which is a prime hangout for punk crowds and features its own separate outside entrance in the back of the building, marked with a neon sign. The main level club area is known as Reality, though this is a nickname only, and is the traditional club entrance in the front. The final public area of the club is known as Elysium, an inside joke by Brennan for the other Kindred. In addition, there are some private areas closed to the public, such as Brennan's penthouse and private suite, and a VIP lounge area. Reality. Featuring a state-of-the-art sound system with bass amps pointed at the floor so that it pulses with the rhythm of the music no matter what is played, the main floor features a massive 10,000 square foot dance floor in addition to 3 additional dance floors suspended in the air above the main floor, reachable by spiral staircases, with one doubling as a stage that can be anchored to a backstage balcony area to prevent swaying when the performers are utilizing it. Other than the dance floors themselves, there is very little lighting, even at the 2 bars. Elysium. Despite being a balcony area running around the walls of the club, only 15 feet above the ground floor, the Elysium is like a whole other nightclub. Due to the music being aimed directly at the dance floor, this area is much quieter and facilitates more intimate conversation and is typically occupied by the club's more sophisticated or older patrons, leaving the dance floors to the more energetic clubgoers. While not officially part of Elysium, many of the city's older kindred will make use of this area or the VIP lounge, and some of the most intense debates among their kind have occurred within the walls of the Succubus Club. Most notably, it is here that the Brujah Tyler spoke with Prosit about his support of Maldavis during her rebellion and ultimately tricked him into feeding from a drugged blood doll before taking him outside and slaying him, draining him completely and securing her own place as Primogen. The Penthouse. The top 2 floors of the club are some of the only areas off-limits to the general public. The 3rd floor contains Brennan Thornhill's private suite, while the 4th floor is where the VIP lounge is located. Typically, very few people occupy this area, but they are some of the most notable kindred and kind in the city. The best artisans, local and national celebrities, big-time drug dealers, and more can be seen here alongside prominent kindred on any given night. This vibe is quite different when a band plays at the club, however, as the VIP area will also act as a de facto backstage area for the band and their entourage, as it gives near direct access to the suspended stage via the elevator. Occasionally, the lounge is also host to legendary parties that many would kill to be a part of, as invites are very limited and highly coveted and almost always include nationally known celebrities of one variety or another. Those kindred who have regular access are often regarded as the cream of vampire society. Brennan's Suite. Brennan keeps a number of havens around the city and rarely sleeps at the club, but nonetheless has spared no expense to make his private area as luxurious as possible. Entry is strictly limited and very few, whether mortal or kindred, have seen it. Most of the rooms are completely windowless except for a small cell that contains 2 sets of arm and leg manacles attached to the wall. This has a window covered with a steel plate and padlocked shut, but that if opened would happen to shine light onto one of the sets of manacles. Brennan has not had need of these restraints yet, but they are ready and waiting should the need arise. Catwalks and rafters. In addition, the open areas of the top floors contain some less conventional areas that some of the more bold kindred and kind choose to make use of. The 3rd floor features a series of catwalks that support much of the sound and lighting for the club, and the 4th floor is home to a series of crisscrossed wooden beams. These are popular spots for the occasional anarch or blood doll who is feeling adventurous. The Labyrinth. Located in the basement of the Succubus Club, the Labyrinth is like an entirely different world compared to the rest of the establishment and caters to a varying but starkly different clientele than the upper floors. Enthusiasts of speed metal, punk, militant rap, and other varieties of more violent music all appear for the sorts of bands that play here. For any that desire a little more privacy to peddle their wares or find a secluded corner for a more intimate encounter, the eponymous Labyrinth within the basement suits their needs. Despite the vast variety of patrons and dregs of society that frequent this level, a culture and set of unspoken rules and customs have formed over the years, and many players have staked out their own territory in the maze. Ultimately, the most important rule is, leave each other alone. No matter what someone is doing or selling, illegal or not, they get left alone. Though the basement has 4 entrances, only 2 are accessible to the public, and only 1 gets used regularly. That being the exterior entrance located off the parking lot at the back of the building. The other is on the main floor of the building interior, but most who prefer the Labyrinth would not be caught dead with the sorts of people who enjoy the rest of the building. It is dark, secluded, and there is always something happening there. Due to this, there are a myriad of encounters that can take place in this part of the club. Drug deals, fist fights, cartel meetups, and the form crumpled on the floor around one of the corners is just as likely to be a drunk sleeping off their latest binge as a corpse. The book provides a number of random encounters that could occur within the maze, from coming across trysts among mortals and blood dolls, to drug deals, to secret kindred meetings, or even the chance to try and follow Portia toward her hidden haven as a step towards learning her true nature. Helena's Vault. Helena's secret haven in the depths of the Succubus Club began its existence as an abandoned dry well that she had been placed in after entering torpor and had long since been filled in. When the original warehouse was built, Prius was there to ensure her resting place was not disturbed, and the basement was built small enough to not reach her sleeping place. In time, she began to stir, and with the aid of Prius and her child Maria, a rich drug dealer was convinced to renovate the warehouse. A group of enthralled construction workers were then used to excavate the area directly above where she slept, and construct a vault next to it, with a door concealed as part of the basement wall. After this, Maria slew the workers. Eventually, the Labyrinth was added to the basement, and the door to this vault lies at one of the dead ends deep within it. For nearly a decade more, she lay undisturbed by anyone other than Prius or Maria. Then Helena awoke. Digging her way through the earth, she broke free from her resting place and promptly slew and drained Maria dry before falling back into a month-long torpor. Upon waking the next time, Prius and the Succubus Club awaited her. It was Helena who led Loden to embrace Brennan Thornhill, and Brennan who unconsciously protected her, making changes to the club to increase her security and keeping employees from potentially finding her haven. In addition, the area near the entrance to her vault antechamber has become the main dealing area for a number of gang members under Kevin Jackson's sway that have become the de facto bodyguards for her home. They never seem to remember seeing her when she passes. The door itself is extremely well concealed and almost impossible to detect. Should someone get to this point, they would then be met by Hecbe, a scorpion the size of a house cat who has fed on Helena's blood since her time as the ruler of Pompeii. It has become so old and powerful that its venom can kill a mortal instantly and cause severe damage even to Kindred, above and beyond the more mundane harm it can cause. From here, yet another secure and heavily concealed door leads to her vault itself, hidden behind a brick wall. Even if it can be found, the myriad of detection devices and traps that lay in wait for an intruder are deadly and near insurmountable, and still Helena's resting place lies concealed yet further beyond, with electrocution, decapitation, and/or a blazing inferno in between her and anyone who might think to track her to her resting place. This is all without considering Prius's vigilance, or Helena's own premonition-inducing auspex and ability to wake on a moment's notice with no grogginess thanks to a thaumaturgical ritual she knows. Club defenses. Despite the number of conflicting interests present at the club and the amount of weapons they carry, the Succubus Club remains a surprisingly safe place, as all who frequent the establishment are too invested to let it come to harm. Brennan employs both mortal and ghoul bouncers, and the building features a state-of-the-art alarm and fire system. Moreover, the club has the protection of both the Mafia and the Chicago police via Brennan's fellow Ventru. Though it is not officially part of Elysium, too many Kindred value the club to allow it to come to harm. Should one of their number get out of hand, it is very likely one of the few times you would see the Camarilla and Anarchs work together to prevent any trouble at the establishment. Brennan also keeps close friendship with the local fire department via donations and gifts, and makes prodigious use of presence and dominate when it comes to building inspectors, all of which help to protect the club from governmental and bureaucratic interference. It is through Brennan's own connections and those of his venture broodmates that he is able to keep negative coverage of the club out of the papers. The extensive amount of underage drinking and the club's hub-like nature to the nation's drug trade are all but invisible to the press. Patronage. There is a sizable section detailing the variety of people who attend the club, both kindred and kind, and it is a healthy mix of all walks of life from both sides. Most notable on the mortal side are the blood dolls who, as I've mentioned in previous videos, are not like the blood dolls in later editions of the game. Here they are wholly mundane mortals who have no knowledge of the kindred, but are known by the name because they enjoy drinking the blood of one another. This is a somewhat amusing, if beneficial, situation for the kindred, as not only does the practice make perfect camouflage for their own feeding, the blood dolls look more like a stereotypical vampire than most actual kindred do. They are often seen dressed in stark black clothing, adorned with vaguely occult-themed silver jewelry, and wearing makeup to make themselves appear paler than normal. On the kindred side of things, members of most sects and clans can be found in attendance. In particular, the Anarchs find that the club is a relatively safe place for them to gather despite being owned by one of Loden's progeny. The book reiterates multiple times that the kindred ownership of the club is only rumored, though Brennan does not seem to hide the fact that he is at least in charge. There are also many members of the Camarilla, and even some independent vampires who frequent the club as well. Of the various clans, only the Nosferatu and Gangrel are notably rare in making appearances, though one cannot always tell with the Nosferatu who may be lurking in the shadows. Of the Gangrel, only the Wolf Pack seems to stop in with any regularity when they are not in town on business. It makes a peculiar note of pointing out that they avoid the club at all costs, quote, when they come to the city in the role of Archons, something that seems to clash slightly with the description of the Archons as we know them. Even many of the city's elders and primogen can often be seen at the club. Competitors. The Succubus Club's primary competition is the Blue Velvet. Rumor has it that it sees many of the machinations of the elders develop under its roof, though this seems to be mostly just a rumor, as most of the primogen seem to prefer the Succubus Club over it. Despite that, most of Loden's brood do seem to frequent the Blue Velvet instead, and it has some anarch coteries that like to hang out there in the hopes of learning what their enemies may be up to. Probably the largest draw for the Blue Velvet is to hear Baby Chorus play, as the band refuses to play at the Succubus Club any longer. Brennan must maintain a delicate balance with the Succubus Club, courting both elders and anarchs, as either group could quickly abandon the place if the establishment were ever seen as being a notable hangout for the other. He fears they could abandon him for the Blue Velvet should that occur, so he regularly spreads whispered rumors about the rival club to cast doubt in it, and will do almost anything to ensure the kindred continue to frequent his club instead. Cast of characters. Most of the characters featured here were detailed in Chicago by Night, so I will not go over those too heavily when I don't need to, but will list them as they appear with any notable details that may be new and relevant to the overarching lore. There are a few new faces, though, which I'll speak of in greater detail. Brennan Thornhill. The venture owner of the Succubus Club, there is not a lot of new details about him here, but it does go more into the nature of Helena's control over him, and notes that he does suspect he is being controlled by a Methuselah. He does not know who it may be, but suspects that Prius may be connected to them. In fact, it was Helena and Prius's manipulations that drove him to open the club in the first place before he ever became one of the kindred. Brennan's only disappointment regarding the club is that he had intended for it to be named simply the Succubus, but when the artist who made the sign added club to the name, it was put up before he had a chance to see it. The name caught on quickly, and he has been unwilling to change it, but those willing to call it by its intended name are more likely to see favorable treatment. Portia. We learned much of the Methuselah Helena in previous titles, and particularly in Chicago by Night, as her story is rooted both literally and figuratively in the foundations of the city, but we have seen only a small portion of her story since her awakening. Here we learn much more of her actions under the guise of Portia, a regular of the club. Upon awakening, Helena finds herself weakened and now part of a world far more altered than she ever could have imagined. Wary of the technology that has appeared in the last century or so, she rarely leaves the confines of the Succubus Club, enjoying the crowds, music, and excitement that remind her of her time ruling Pompeii. She has taken on the name Portia and the guise of a reticent neonate from the Greek Isles, fearful of the older kindred around her. In this there is a grain of truth, as there are many who would happily slay her. Despite this, she is smarter, stronger, and more attractive than almost anyone in the city, and this allows her to play her role carefully. She enjoys talking with the mortal clubgoers and is developing a unique view of the modern world through discussion with them, picking up slang and a more modern way of speaking, careful to not let archaic jargon slip out. She tries to avoid conversations with other kindred and feigns ignorance about historical events, but as she also knows little of the modern world, she tends to stay quiet among them, leading to the belief that she is timid. Prius. Little new info is revealed about Prius beyond the fact that he is, in part, the reason the history of the building the Succubus Club is housed in has been so storied and strange. Seeing the city built up around Helena's resting place, he ensured that the area would always be safe for her. When his bond began to weaken, he nearly abandoned her, but a telepathic urging from her that he chose to follow ultimately led to the establishment of the club, so that the place where she awoke would be both safe and exciting. Helena has as of yet not noticed that Prius no longer drinks from her, as she is so absorbed in this new world she finds herself in and her plots against Menelaus. Prius is torn between taking revenge for Helena's betrayal in bonding him, and remembering the joy of their past. Having been the one directing how her haven was built, should he ever decide to have his revenge, he knows the workings of everything around her better than anyone and will be able to do so. John Toynbee. A close friend from Brennan's mortal life, it was John Toynbee who provided the financial backing when Thornhill first started dealing drugs as a teenager. As Brennan became more and more successful, John faded into the background but reappeared sometime after the club opened to seek his friend's help after spending months beating his cocaine addiction. Brennan saw immediate value in his old friend and made him his second-in-command at the club. After his embrace, Brennan began to be less and less hands-on with the club and relies much more heavily on John, who functionally runs the day-to-day now. The club was originally open to launder money from Brennan's drug trade, but its popularity makes this task unnecessary for keeping it running, and since 1985, John has taken on a majority of the responsibility over the club and only sees Brennan at night any longer. Though he does not know what has happened to his friend, John has seen a large number of strange things at the club and is slowly becoming more and more suspicious of the truth of things. Though he watches Brennan and his friends, the other kindred, more closely due to his suspicions, it is unlikely that he would act against them, as he feels he owes Brennan too much to do such a thing. Rex Jameson. One of the first bouncers the club employed upon its opening in 1982, Rex and the Succubus Club are nearly synonymous in people's minds. As time has gone on, Rex has become the head of the club's security, and though he does not know of the existence of the Kindred, he does know that Brennan allows some very strange individuals to have an extensive amount of leeway in the club. He attributes much of the weird stuff he's seen to drugs, and knows to let Brennan's special friends get away with more than the usual clubgoer. Besides, they often prove surprisingly useful in stopping or preventing fights that can crop up from time to time. Kyle Riper and Sandra Oshie. Having first met Brennan as teenagers when they were trying to find a dealer to acquire steroids to aid them in their aims to become Olympic-level powerlifters, Brennan happily supplied them and their careers began to take off. He lost track of them over time, but sometime just before the club opened, he saw them featured on television and sought them out to be bouncers and a bit of publicity for the Succubus Club, as well as to provide a bit of muscle for his less-than-legal dealings. Though they are more than capable of handling themselves, they rarely have to actually fight, as their sheer size is enough to intimidate most into submission. After his embrace, Brennan understood that some threats may be more severe than others, and chose to enhance them further and ensure their loyalty by giving them his blood and making both of them ghouls. Unknown to him, however, they have already been blood-bound to someone else. After he first fed them his blood, Helena went to them in secret and did the same, wiping their memories of her visit afterwards and continued to do so for 3 consecutive nights. Afterward, they continued to feed from Brennan, but had already been bound to the Methuselah. Compelling them to both seek combat training, the two are now particularly adept fighters and easily able to handle the majority of kindred troublemakers that may pop up in the club. Despite an appreciation for their help in keeping things under control in the club, Rex does not trust them, but has little recourse as they seemingly answer only to Brennan. Other staff. In addition to the more prominent faces noted above, the Succubus Club keeps a number of other staff on hand. There are usually 5 to 10 bouncers on duty on a given night, with more hired on as needed for larger events. Half stick to the basement level with the rest patrolling the main floor. Rex handles the door, sometimes with one other. They are rarely needed on the upper floors. With the various bars located within the club, a number of bartenders are also employed. Originally, Brennan had interest in keeping highly skilled people on staff for this, but after his embrace, he has lost interest in the endeavor. Despite that, Toynbee maintains a well-trained staff for the upper floors, but will take whoever he can get for the main floor and basement bars, excepting when a major event is being put on, where only the best will do. Where Brennan's interest in bartenders has waned, he has kept a keen interest in having highly skilled waitresses ever since his embrace, and is not above poaching them from the competition. He initially vowed to never feed on the staff of the club, but over time this vow has faded, and he will occasionally use them if needed, though he tries to limit this as much as possible. Kindred regulars. A number of Chicago's Kindred are noted as regulars at the Succubus Club, including Balthazar, who regularly shows up to scout out the Anarchs, and even Lorraine is noted as an attendee despite her likely demise in Blood Bond. Presumably, this book was written as agnostic to the general plots of the story-focused books, to allow for the club's full use at any point it is needed. Other frequent visitors are Hank Cave, Theodore Dooley, Levesque, Damien, Genghis, Gordon Keaton, Malcolm, Son, Evan Klein in his Raymond Falcon persona, Annabelle, Sophia Ayez, Brett Stryker, Garwood Marshall, Capone, and Kevin Jackson. Prius is also noted in this list, despite not being a kindred. In addition, Loden will also make the occasional appearances, and even the Nosferatu Elusid has begun to make appearances via the use of Obfuscate, though he sticks primarily to the Labyrinth to meet other Anarchs. Notable absences from the club include Maria, who was slain by Helena upon her waking, though no one in the city is aware of this fact, and Tyler, who used to frequent the club, but is unknowingly being kept away by Helena out of the Methuselah's fear of being recognized. In addition, the members of Baby Horse refuse to play at the club any longer after being swarmed by a group of blood dolls the last time they were there, and will not do so as long as it is their primary hangout. Despite this, most members of the band do still hang out there, excepting Kathy Glens. William Killigrew. Among the plethora of blood dolls who frequent the club, one is more well known than most. William Killigrew has shared his blood with hundreds of different people and is a veritable social butterfly who many find easy to talk to despite his air of perpetual disdain. Amongst the hundreds he has shared blood with are a number of kindred, and over time he has begun to glean knowledge of the true nature of vampires. This knowledge may once have been benign, but recent events have shifted his feelings on the matter. His family were old friends with the Helcombs, who were recently brutally slain. This is the family of Damien's new ward, Neon. And he knows it was the work of a vampire, though his knowledge is imperfect as he suspects the culprit was Damien who killed them. Killigrew could prove to be an extremely dangerous hunter despite his lack of combat training, as he has deep knowledge of the club's patrons and is overlooked as harmless by the kindred who know him. This threat could theoretically be avoided should he come across Neon before he acts, but this is unlikely to happen. Annabelle's Party. And now the torch, and shadows lead, were it not so black and not so hard to see. How can it help you when you don't know what you need? How can anybody set you free? Sisters of Mercy, Torch. Scene 1. What a swell party. Annabelle is hosting an invite-only party at the Succubus Club taking place in the VIP lounge, and the coterie, or at least some of them, are lucky enough to have been invited. However, the party is quickly ruined by a series of pranks played, leaving Annabelle humiliated in front of her peers and a number of Toreador visiting from out of town. The first of these is a simple, apparent slip-up with invitations. Michael and Sharon Payne, whom we met in Chicago by night, both arrived within minutes of each other. Their feud is well known to most in the city, and as such they are never both invited to events. Often neither of them is. They avoid each other for a time, but are soon at each other's throats. First fighting about who should leave to avoid a scene, and quickly devolving into a fight about whether or not they are already creating one. Annabelle pulls them aside to try and smooth things over, but they soon stalk out of the club, leaving her embarrassed and starting comments about her inability to control her own childer. Recovering quickly, Annabelle gives a short speech and notes that her child Sophia Ayes will be giving a performance as the first entertainment for the night. Stepping up to a makeshift stage, Sophia announces that she will be doing something different than her usual form of dance, with the assistance of Brett Stryker, and that it was made just for Annabelle. Brett joins her in what begins as a moderately well-performed ballet duet, but is nothing spectacular. Soon, however, it results in them removing their clothes before sinking their fangs into one another in a joint feeding that shocks and horrifies many in the crowd, none more than Annabelle, who quickly rushes them from the stage, a curtain being drawn over the mess that they left behind. Once more she is left embarrassed by her own progeny. Now visibly shaken, Annabelle proceeds to unveil an industrial art sculpture she has acquired to the interest of the other Toreador at the gathering. They group up around it, and Annabelle warms to the discussion about the piece, mentioning that it's from an up-and-coming mortal sculptor that she had found. Before long, however, it is noticed by someone present that this is, in fact, not a sculpture at all, but a governor mechanism from a steam locomotive, revealing that Annabelle has been deceived. Now thoroughly rattled, Annabelle decides that if you want to do something right, you must simply do it yourself. Approaching a grand piano in the lounge, she settles into play, opening a sheaf of sheet music. Soon, partygoers are gathered to her, attracted by the strange and quirky but enchanting piece. As she plays, Timosius, who sat bored in the corner most of the evening, perks up and takes notice, his head tilting slightly and furrowing his brow as he listens. Annabelle takes note and swells with pride, answering questions about the composer when she is done, a musical protege who is obsessed with her and created the work just for her. The moment of triumph is not meant to last, however, as Timosius suddenly strides over to the piano with his violin in hand and turns the sheet music upside down, beginning to play. With this, it is revealed that the music is not original at all, merely a popular classical Beethoven piece that has been inverted. For a moment, the gathered kindred are stunned to silence. Then, slowly, and at the back of the room and spreading rapidly to others, a chuckle sounds out. As this spreads, some of the chuckles turn into howls of laughter, punctuated by the violin that is still playing. With this final humiliation, something within Annabelle snaps, and she lunges at Timosius with a guttural cry in the throes of a sudden fury frenzy, intent on killing or maiming him if she is not restrained. Scene 2. Another fine mess. As Annabelle is pulled off Timosius and led away by Loden and some of the other Primogen present, word quickly passes to the rest of the club of the night's events. It is clear that something strange has happened, and many present will begin to investigate, and the coterie itself could easily be drawn in through a variety of means, either out of their own curiosity, being compelled by an elder of their clan, or even by accusations heaped upon them by those with ulterior motives such as Balthazar, who likely has it out for the group. One of the simplest links to make would be the steam locomotive mechanism to the Ventru Edgar Drummond, who controls the city's railways. In the case of the Payne's invitations, Brett Stryker has been taking them at the door, and if inspected, it is able to be determined that Sharon's was indeed a very good forgery, but was printed on a slightly different paper stock. As for the upside-down sheet music, enlisting the aid of Bobby Weatherbottom, who was also at the party, can help narrow down how it was made and the kind of computer that may have been used to print it. Seeking him out may also endear him to the group for making him feel needed. Some more industrious kindred, including many of the other partygoers, may seek to track down the mortal musician and or sculptor. Though it is possible to do so, they will reveal little, having had their minds tampered with, and both believe they provided their own works to Annabelle. Finally, Sophia and Brett can be tracked down before they leave the club. However, this particular blunder is a red herring, as the dance was Sophia's attempt to develop a form of erotic art that would appeal to vampires, and is not part of some deeper machination, and simply the result of poor judgment. Scene 3. The Chase. The evidence at hand seems to point to Edgar Drummond, the Ventru in control of the city's railway system. Other kindred looking into the situation are likely to come to the same realization, and it soon becomes a race to see who can find his haven and get to him first, all with varying motives for wanting to do so. There are a number of kindred in the city who know the location of his haven, but most are unwilling to tell someone they are not friendly with, and many kindred in the city may be interested in sending competitors on a wild goose chase. Should a kindred not be found to reveal the location, some reasoning and investigation can narrow down the potential location of the haven quite easily given Drummond's role in the city and obsession with trains. Barring all other recourse, it is possible to simply follow someone else on the chase who may have known or found the location of the haven themselves and confront them upon arrival to get them out of the way. When Annabelle was rushed off by Loden and the present Primogen, a call was put out to the remaining Primogen, summoning them to an emergency meeting to discuss what is happening. It is very likely Loden will have made the same connections as others, and at this time also summons Drummond to him, along with putting the city's police on high alert in the guise of a suspected terrorist threat on the railway warehouse where Drummond's haven is kept. Loden intended to speak to his child before any others can, and there will be a number of forces arrayed against any who would seek to, both kindred and kind in origin. This includes both Balthazar and Nathaniel Bordre, who have orders to use appropriate force to keep others away. In both cases, appropriate begins with maiming, and even destruction is not outside the realm of possibility. Alongside the expected parties, both the city's hidden Methuselah also have attention on the situation. As they both believe they are in control of Annabelle, they both see the other's hand in the events that took place. Helena, having made the connection to Drummond almost instantly, will quickly leave the club and seek him out. Though she will easily be the first to find him, she does not interfere in others' attempts to find him and simply uses Dominate to get the information she wants from him before leaving him and pursuing the plot more deeply. This takes her out of this story as written, but the potential for this to come up again exists for any ST who wishes to use it. Scene 4. Vengeance is Mine. The coterie manages to track down Drummond, but has difficulty determining what is actually going on. Depending on how long they took, other forces may have arrived there first, potentially further complicating matters. Drummond can be unpleasant to deal with in the best of times, often amounting to a spoiled 6-year-old in a middle-aged man's body, and he may be even more difficult to deal with now depending on who has reached him first, and he may even try to flee. Drummond is convinced that the whole thing was his plan and was a revenge plot, but there seems to be a deeper plot at hand if the coterie can manage to work around Drummond's quirky nature and convince him that what he believes is not true. Most likely it will be scattered references to his good friend that reveals the truth of things, and with some clearly placed comments or expert deduction, it is soon revealed that Horatio Ballard, another of Loden's progeny, has been speaking with Drummond at length despite the man's known distaste for his train-loving broodmate. Scene 5. Tangled Webs. The true culprit's attention is drawn to the group and begins to lay traps and obstacles in their path, such as diverting attention from himself to his nephew Lawrence, as Drummond will only refer to his friend as Ballard, and there are 2 such kindred in the city. If his hand is forced, he may even throw the full weight of his control over the banking institutions against the coterie. Bank accounts wiped out, credit cards cancelled, names blacklisted at financial institutions across the city, foreclosed mortgages on havens, and so on. With so many of the Ventrue inclined to believe that this whole thing was an anarch plot, the group may even be branded as anarchs or anarch sympathizers and be hunted under false pretenses. The story can branch off in multiple directions from this point if the storyteller wishes to carry the tale forward. What is really going on? The true culprit behind the plot is Horatio Ballard, who wants to weaken Annabelle's position as Primogen by embarrassing and discrediting the Toreador. This is all part of a plan for Horatio to become a member of the Primogen himself, but did not want to move against her directly. In this, Edgar Drummond proved to be a most useful tool. Ballard befriended his fellow Ventrue and flattered him with talk of the railway's importance and how foolish others were for not seeing it. He convinced him to sponsor a huge festival dedicated to the importance of the railway system that saw galleries exhibiting railway-themed art, theaters playing films that featured trains or the railway in some way, and so on. Talks even began of opening a national museum of rail transportation in Chicago that would see related collections moved from all over to be featured in it. Such an event could hardly take place without Annabelle and the other Toreador making an appearance, but as they had no hand in it, she was quick to treat the whole thing with contempt, referring to it as a childish diversion, and sent Drummond into a rage, swearing revenge on her. It was at this time that Ballard began to plant suggestions into Drummond's mind, not even needing his powers to do so. Drummond quickly convinced himself that these ideas were his own and moved to act. Annabelle would be hosting a party at the Succubus Club to celebrate the day of her embrace, and Ballard knew past attempts to impress prominent members of her clan had failed previously and saw this as the perfect weakness to exploit. Once suitably embarrassed, and with all the culpability falling directly on Drummond, Ballard would be free of blame and ready to begin enacting further plans to ruin Annabelle's image, and further diminish the belief that she is suitable to be a member of the Primogen. Player of Pawns. He's a lover of life, but a player of pawns. Yes, the king on his sunset lies waiting for dawn, to light up his jungles as play is resumed. The monkeys seem willing to strike up the tune. Jethro Tull, Bungle in the Jungle. Scene 1. The Mysterious Stranger. It is an average night at the Succubus Club when the coterie come across two elders, Critias and a strange kindred from Russia, Dmitri, playing chess, seemingly ignorant of the screaming of the music and the vibrant activity around them. As if feeling their gaze, the unknown kindred turns and looks down at them, a grin spreading across his face ear to ear and exposing his fangs. He beckons them to join him and Critias, who pointedly does not look at them the entire time. He introduces himself and asks if any of the coterie are connoisseurs of the game. Whatever the answer, he indicates that the game is far more engaging than it may appear. Critias notes that he needs to concentrate, and Dmitri apologizes and notes the critical juncture the game is at before asking the gathered group to depart, noting that they may yet meet again. Beyond this meeting, the night is completely uneventful for all but one of them. Sometime after they are dismissed, likely near the end of the night, a beautiful blood doll approaches one of the members of the coterie and asks them to somewhere secluded to share something to drink, and leads them to the rear alley of the building. It is here they are attacked by Pavlov, one of Dmitri's childer, and others if need be, subdued and kidnapped. They are taken to a currently closed-down production studio serving as Dmitri's haven while he is in town. He appears and speaks to them of how well his game is going, that he has captured not only a bishop, but also a pawn. With this, the kidnapped member of the group is thrown into the film vault there along with a mortal. The mortal, Randy, is a philosophy student of Critias's, and will not survive more than a day in the airtight vault. As the kindred's limbs begin to lose feeling with the sunrise outside, a decision must be made. The mortal will no longer be alive the next time they wake. Is it better to console them, feed, or perhaps make the ultimate choice and see that their existence continues? Scene 2. Another move. The following night, the absence of one of the group is noticed, but not overly concerning, and the two elders are encountered once more playing against one another. When spotted, Dmitri comes down to speak with the coterie, clearly in a great mood and making small talk about American cities. Critias doesn't move, sitting stone-faced and staring at the board. A kindred sensitive to such things will, however, note the cold fury that emanates from him, and Dmitri eventually returns to the game. The night continues once more uneventfully. Attempts to check up on the missing member will reveal little, but it can be found that they did not stay in their haven the night before. As the night draws to a close and the group heads home, another of them is taken, this time by Rolf, another of Dmitri's brood, also aided by a ghoul and some mortals as Pavlov was the night before. Should the coterie stick together, others of Dmitri's group will try to lure them away before one of them is taken. Scene 3. Dmitri's rant. The newly captured group member is thrown in the vault with the first that was taken, and Randy is either dead or embraced at this point. Dmitri makes an appearance just before sunrise and explains to them the true nature of the game of chess he and Critias are playing, saying that Critias invited him, and while the game typically uses only mortals as pieces, Critias suggested that they use Kindred and offered his own blood as a reward, so in truth their plight is on the head of Critias. He also rants that Critias plays like the devil, and is killing his men while Dmitri merely captures his opponents and says he is sick of this game already but cannot stop due to the stakes of the game and pleads for them to understand his position. He notes that he does not wish them to starve and provides another mortal along with an oxygen tank. This time the mortal is one Deborah Stanford, a lawyer who was abducted by one of Dmitri's childer from her office. She awakes terrified, and as the vault is pitch black, one of the kindred will have to help her with the oxygen tank, or she too will be at risk of death. If Randy was turned, he will desperately need to feed, either from her or from one of the kindred. Scene 4. The Vampire Shaman. The coterie clearly understands that something is wrong by this point, particularly if they were lured away while a second of their group was taken the night before. By this point, their assailant has become overconfident, and the group will realize that they are being followed by a cloaked figure. Attempts to capture the mysterious man will result in evasion, but otherwise he will not act until after they reach the Succubus Club, where they go to begin looking into the first disappearance. The chess game continues, but Critias is notably furious by this point, while Dmitri barely pays attention, perusing the various amenities of the club. Upon leaving, the mysterious figure finally makes their move. This is Kili Kilarvin, another one of Dmitri's brood, who will attack with various mortals if the coterie is still together. This time, however, they receive aid from Damien, and are able to subdue and capture the other kindred. They learn the location that the others from the coterie are being held before the man suddenly falls into a torpor-like state, having been conditioned by Dmitri to do so before revealing any info about him. With dawn approaching, they cannot act on this information and need to wait until the next night. The captured members of the group must continue to endure Dimitri's ravings, demanding to know the location of the remaining coteries' havens, insisting that everything is Critias' fault, and saying he only means to warn them. But by this point, he is so upset it is clear he is lying. He storms off, sealing the vault once more without any additional mortals. By this point, if Deborah is still alive, she is quickly losing her grip on reality and her sanity, particularly if Randy was embraced, as he insists on learning more about his condition. If she was also embraced, her sanity will likely slip even further out of reach as she begins to deny everything she is told, believing something entirely different is happening. Scene 5. The Haven and the Hag. The remaining coterie members, now knowing the location of their missing friends, take matters into their own hands. Should they stop at the Succubus Club for any reason, they will find Critias and Dimitri once more, but this time Dimitri is upset. They will be redirected out of the club by a bouncer under Critias' control to avoid the Malkavian's wrath. In short order, they make their way to where the others are being held, but they must get through Dimitri's defenses to rescue them. A terrible hag spirit bars their path, and they risk their very wills to the creature in order to make it to rescue the others. She has no physical form, but can potentially enslave members of the coterie if she is able to drain their willpower. She cannot be physically harmed, but is susceptible to dominate, and the items she is bound to can potentially be found with auspex. It is an unassuming rock hidden in a desk drawer in another room, and if somebody can claim it, then they will be able to control her. In addition to the hag, Rolf and Barb are also protecting the vault. If they are losing a fight, they will flee and attempt to reach Dimitri at the Succubus Club. There is also the vault itself to contend with, which takes an incredible amount of skill or strength to open and may take some time to get into, meaning they are in a race with time to rescue their allies before Dimitri makes an appearance, though they are likely to escape before that happens. The final showdown comes the next night. Scene 6. The Wrath of Dimitri. Dimitri will do everything in his power to seek out the coterie, and everyone allied with him will be scouring the streets trying to track them down. The coterie should realize quickly the best move is to return to the Succubus Club, as it is public, populated, and probably the safest place for a kindred to be. Critias and Dimitri will both be there, and Dimitri is enraged to the point of nearly frenzying at the turn his game has taken. If anyone mentions him losing his game, he will immediately enter a full-on fury frenzy and begin attacking the coterie directly. This will cause mortals to flee in a panic, and the fire alarm will quickly be pulled to clear the club of mortals. The kindred among the clubgoers will remain to watch the spectacle that Dimitri is causing. Even Helena, who has followed events closely, will remain in the VIP lounge and watch events unfold, fascinated but unwilling to step in. It is at this point that Critias will step in personally, as Dimitri has finally crossed the line by attacking directly. The fight will be close, and Critias is at risk of losing unless the coterie aids him, but Dimitri's brood is present and they will have to get through them to offer aid. With any help from the group, the tides will turn and Critias will defeat the Malkavian swiftly, sinking his fangs into the other's neck and draining him. With his death, Dimitri's group will cease any action, each reacting in their own way to their sire's death, with only Killikilarvin expressing joy that he is now free from his demon. Exulting in his victory and the rush of ancient blood, Critias offers the coterie any favor of him. Should they express disdain at his actions, he will attempt to sway them to his point of view. But for any aspiring to rise in the Camarilla, the favor of one as ancient as Critias is a mighty boon indeed. Dimitri's followers are told to leave and never return, and the club quickly resumes operations after any mess is cleaned up, with events being explained away as a false alarm. If Dimitri should somehow manage to win, once Critias is incapacitated, his frenzy will depart, and he will cease aggression, bowing to the group and thanking them for a wonderful game, saying that they are welcome in Russia at any time, and swiftly departs with his group. If any should attempt to harm Critias in his vulnerable state, he will summon aid. In particular, he will call Damien and reveal to him that he is his sire. This will cause Damien to protect Critias, as he has many questions for the Brujah. Either way, if the coterie is angry with Critias for involving them in this game, Prius is likely to approach the group and try to get them on Helena's side against Critias to place them in opposition to Menelae. Loden is likely to look negatively upon the whole affair and will try to take it out on Critias or the coterie. If the latter comes to pass, Critias will aid them whether the group wants him to or not. What is really going on? If it were not obvious by now, the whole situation is, in fact, a live chess game using the characters and other unwitting mortals and kindred as the pieces. The game is something that Dimitri has come up with and travels around the world to face off against different elders. The two determine specific mortals as their pawns, and the court pieces are kindred chosen from their brood or their domain. As the real pieces are affected, they move pieces on the chessboard to represent these actions. The pieces are meant to be unaware of the situation, however Dimitri's brood and ghouls travel with him and act as his. As they've been through numerous games, many elders have deemed this an unfair advantage, so Dmitri offers up his own blood as stakes to sweeten the pot. If he loses, they may bond him or drain him completely as they wish. The fact that Dmitri is of the 4th generation makes this offer enticing enough for most to take, and many elders have risked their childer and retainers on Dmitri's game. All have lost. Critias has chosen the coterie to act as his court pieces due to their ability to work together, and also because they mean very little to him personally, and the effect on him will be minimal if he loses the game. A crass and inhumane view that will likely cause the elder to lose humanity before the game is done. The coterie make up at least some of the rooks, bishops, and knights. Damien, secretly his child, takes the role of Critias' queen, and a wild card he hopes to use to great effect. The 2 elders themselves act as the kings. Dmitri's abduction of Critias' pieces are in an attempt to instill a hatred for Critias into them, not understanding that to these younger generations of Kindred their freedom is of utmost importance to them. Though he can play strategically, he feels that acting in this straightforward, unreasonable manner will throw off Critias, who is known for his philosophical reasoning and will be unable to guess at his tactics. Critias, however, has guessed this as he was not just a Greek philosopher, but a sophist, and expects many of his opponents' moves, if not how successful they will be. He plays at seeming to ignore his court pieces and focuses on his pawns each night, strongly suspecting that the coterie will learn the truth behind what is happening and become enraged, though he cannot tell them directly of the game. Dmitri is known for his frenzies and believes that the group confronting him will set him off, allowing Critias to take a direct hand in matters. Only a small number of elders know of the game, and many view it as an unnecessary risk to the masquerade, and may likely move to stop it. Similarly, the Justicards will not look kindly on any who are part of it should they catch wind. Should the group encounter Alexander Danov at any point and describe Dmitri to him, he will warn them of what is happening. Danov was once an unwitting bishop of Dmitri's when he still lived in Russia. Danov will not interfere, but will offer advice to the coterie based on his experience. The deeper truth still is that this too is part of the greater game played by Helena and Menelae. Menelae pulled the strings that led to Critias playing against Dmitri and choosing the coterie as his pieces. He has set things in motion to ensure that Critias wins, knowing that he will need to make Critias stronger to be more useful in his war against Helena. Characters. Dmitri. When Dmitri first learned of the game that would come to be known as chess, he was already a kindred of the Malkavian clan. Traveling through a deep jungle in India in 828 AD, a voice spoke in his head, summoning him. Wary at first, but feeling the welcome in the summons was from one of his kind, he came to an ancient temple and inside found Rama, with whom he played his first game. Thus began a tradition that would continue for countless centuries. As the game evolved and spread across the world, Dmitri would bring new rules to Rama to challenge Rama again and again, but continually losing to the unmatched wisdom and strategy of the ancient Hindu kindred. After many centuries and many such defeats, in 1388 AD, Dmitri questioned Rama about his age. He would say only that he achieved the state of karmic balance and stability in this state of being before Siddhartha Gautama renounced his way of life and left his palace behind. Realization came to Dmitri that Rama had attained Golconda and knew that he must have this gift as well. Asking to be taught, Rama only smiled and said that he had far to go before he could ever accept the debt that he must repay. With this, a deep and unmitigated fury overtook Dmitri, and he lunged at the ancient being, battering and slashing at him. He tore a branch from a nearby tree and drove it into the other's chest and tore his neck open, drinking deeply from him. The flowing blood drove him even further into his frenzy, and the blood began to instill him with incredible power. All the while Rama stared unblinking until his eyes glazed over and his body withered. Though he never truly understood the change that came over him with this action, Dmitri now stood as one of the 4th generation. With this, he returned to Russia and focused on his one true love in undeath, the game of chess. Soon he began traveling the world and challenging the most skilled opponents, with strange stipulations for the games being required to be held only at night, and other demands made it to the ears of the Camarilla, and they feared a masquerade breach and began harassing him. After enduring this torment for a century, he returned to Russia in 1623 and fell into a deep torpor. Rising once more during the time of Napoleon, he challenged the leader to a match, and it was the first time he had lost since facing Rama. Furious and baffled that sleep could have dulled his senses so thoroughly, he vowed the man would live to see a strategic defeat. Soon after, Napoleon failed to take Russia. Falling into torpor once more, he awoke next when German tanks tread over the ground in which he rested. Swearing the owners would regret trying to raise his motherland, he saw that they too were defeated. This time he remained awake and marveled at the modern world. He found chess to be all but the national sport of his country, but was disappointed to learn that the rules had barely changed and felt the need to innovate himself. It was with this that he developed his live version of the game that he now delights in playing. The game serves a dual purpose. It gives him the thrill he seeks, and also serves to destabilize the domains of those he defeats. Dmitri has not forgotten the slights of the Camarilla many centuries before, and since his most recent awakening, has made a number of alliances with the Sabbat. Pavlov Rasporovich, a loyal Russian soldier who was sent to Siberia for standing up to his general before he could harm a peasant girl. Pavlov always enjoyed being among people and wished to leave his mark on the world, but now he was stuck in a wasteland where nothing seemed to be able to live. What he found one patrol, however, was not alive. As his red blood flowed onto the snow, he pondered if that was all the mark he would leave, a scarlet stain on the snow of this frozen hell that would never disappear. But Pavlov did not disappear either. His sire taught him what it meant to be one of the undead. In time, he would no longer stay with his sire, for he desired to be among people again. Though his sire feared society, he did not. In time, Pavlov met Dmitri when the ancient kindred rose during World War II, and he has followed him since. He does not care for the Sabbat, but will not act against Dmitri despite this. Barbara. A ghoul to Pavlov, she saw herself as a rebel during her time and eschewed the life of a housewife, divorcing her husband and becoming a long-haul trucker. It was during this time in her life that she devoured books and other media relating to vampires. She envied the power they wielded and fantasized about becoming one of them. Then, one fateful night in 1984 around 2 a.m., a too-pale man came into the diner she was in, and she immediately recognized him for what he was. Moving to sit across him, she sat silently and stared at him, and as their gazes met, she thought clearly, "I know you." Startled, the man looked around, prepared for enemies, before relaxing and asked her how. She soon told him everything, her entire story and her infatuation with creatures such as he, and asked to become one of them. The man laughed and showed her the night. She said he could now not let her go, as she knew his secrets and must make her one of them, or at least allow her to stay with him and protect him while he slept. He laughed harder at this before considering, and eventually bit into his wrist, offering his blood to her. Barbara has served Pavlov faithfully since that time, and Dmitri in turn, hoping that one day the ancient kindred will give Pavlov the permission to bring her fully into the night. Unlike her master, she has no qualms with the Sabbat, and indeed thinks the Camarilla are the strange ones, believing that all vampires were like the Sabbat due to the many stories she read. Rolf. Fighting for the Allies on the front during World War II, Rolf was one of only a few surviving members of his unit after a long battle keeping German tanks at bay. Cold and tired, they stopped to rest and Rolf fell asleep. When next he woke, it was dark, and the man who sat next to him was dead with a bullet in his head. There were prints in the mud from boots and tank treads all around. The Germans had come and gone, leaving after believing him frozen and dead. How had he not woken this whole time? Then he heard the voices. Germans. He could have his revenge yet. As they passed by, he leapt up and speared one of them with a bayonet, pulling it free and stabbing the next as well. The third began to raise his rifle, but Rolf's weapon was stuck in the second soldier. As the soldier aimed at his head, he screamed, "You can't kill that which is already dead, fool!" And whether the German understood Russian or was just stunned, he hesitated long enough for Rolf to lunge at him. The rifle went off, and the blast threw him back. As he lay bleeding, he looked to the soldier, who no longer had a head. Another man stood near, holding the head, licking from the bloody wound where it was severed. After drinking his fill, the man approached him, noting his valor and that his master needed men like him. Did he wish to truly be one who could not die? Rolf did not wish to die, and soon the man, Pavlov, drank from his wound and fed him in turn, claiming him as one of the kindred. Rolf has since been a loyal servant to Pavlov, being willfully blood-bombed to him. Darva Filispa. A KGB agent sent to spy on Dmitri, the mysterious older man who lived on a family wealth that none in the organization could seem to trace. His mansion attracted chess champions from across the USSR. Anytime they tried to plant someone within his household or get someone in to meet him, it's like he knew who they were so clearly he must be a foreign spy to know so much about their people. Eventually, a British chess champion arrived, and she knew this was her chance. But as she moved up to the mansion in the cover of dark, a figure fell upon her from the trees and bit into her neck before feeding her from his own. In this quick action, Rolf embraced her, and she was finally able to meet Dmitri. A spy? It seemed laughable now. Clearly, there are far worse things to fear in the world. Jordan McConnell. A young idealistic student fresh out of college, Jordan knew that the world could be made better and that socialism or communism was the way it could be achieved. He set out to tour Europe and began with Russia. Before long, he attracted the attention of the KGB and was tortured and interrogated about who sent him and what his mission was, not believing that an American truly believed in communism. They ultimately shot him and left him for dead, but he was found by Darva, who sat with him as he died and spoke with him at length about communism and its benefits for mankind, and before he died she fed him some of her blood to keep him alive and took him to Dmitri. Dmitri refused to allow his embrace, but did allow his wounds to be treated, and allowed Darva to continue feeding him her blood. She awaits the day that she will be allowed to embrace him. Killy-Killarvan. Once a shaman in a small Finnish village during the mid-12th century when the Christians began to come in force to convert their people. Killy-Killarvan, in an attempt to gain power necessary to prevent his people's conversion, journeyed far to the east where a dark chief was said to reside who would grant anything if he could be bested in a game. Arriving at the tower the being dwelled in, he was granted entrance by pale maidens. The game to be played was chess, and the being that Killy-Killarvan sought was Dmitri. He lost miserably, and the price to be paid was his soul. Finding Killy-Killarvan fascinating, Dmitri embraced him, promising him the power to destroy those who disrespected him. After the act was done, the shaman sought the spirits who once communed with him, but found that they now fled in terror of his new existence. Instead, he was forced to subjugate them and wrest the aid from them he once was granted freely to obtain the power he needed to cast spells for Dmitri. Every time he must now do this, he dies a little more inside, believing that he will become a true monster in time. This is not the respect he sought, this is simply fear. It should be noted that though Killy-Killarvan is Malkavian much like his sire, he has robust access to thaumaturgic powers, presumably relating to his shamanistic abilities in life. He bears a number of unique abilities tied to the manipulation of spirits and ghosts, and it is noted that this is an extremely rare occurrence among Kindred, who need to have learned much of it while mortal, and that it is likely only practiced by those in, quote, primitive regions of the world, and by some who hail from the Sabbat. He is also noted at 9th generation, and it is stated he was embraced before Dimitri's diablerie of Rama, meaning that Dmitri seemingly went from 8th gen to 4th gen with the act. The Hag. It took Killy-Killarvan days of searching and an astral form to locate a spirit powerful enough to serve Dimitri's purpose, but he had at last located one in a cave in Scotland. Journeying there, Dmitri insisted the spirit, an old hag in appearance who had inhabited the cave for centuries, be tied to the ebony stone that he provided to the one-time shaman. Winning a battle of wills with her, Killy bound her to the rock and offered it to Dmitri, the stone still burning with the spirit's rage. He laughed despite the damage caused to his hand and declared that she would be the perfect piece for his game, his queen. Since this time, Dmitri hides the rock in his chosen haven to protect it and the pieces he captures in his game. She will not attack any of Dimitri's bloodline. Fundamental differences. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. Scene 1. Night Fury. Arriving at the Succubus Club, the coterie finds large groups of people standing around outside the club. Not unusual for a busy night, but it is quickly determined that a good portion of the people present are not the typical clubgoers. There is a large protest being staged outside the building, made up predominantly of fundamentalist Christians who are protesting against the blood doll subculture that has sprung up predominantly within the Succubus Club, whom they view as a sort of death cult. If any of the coterie are dressed similarly to the typical blood doll, or at least what one thinks a blood doll might dress like, they will be accosted by Purvis Ramsley, a man in jeans and flannels that yells at them to seek salvation and turn back from the devil, and stop drinking blood. Something concerning for any vampire to be accused of by a mortal, certainly. Choosing to interact with Purvis, they learn the protesters are from Gary, and that the man was paid to join the protest by an elegant gentleman, who approached him outside the homeless shelter, though Purvis has since been caught up in the religious fervor. The Blood Dolls have begun to form a counter-protest against the group, who they label as self-righteous bigots, and it seems like violence will soon break out, the police trying to keep them separate, struggling to contain the opposing factions. Before this happens, Brennan Thornhill makes an appearance and manages to calm both groups, and insists that they remain peaceful, noting that he knows nothing of these accusations and assures the protesters that he and his patrons would certainly wish to know more. With this, some of the group's leaders step forward from the rest to speak with him. At the same time, a man dressed like some sort of priest steps up as well and taps Brendan on the shoulder to speak to the club owner, but as he does, a violent shriek pierces the air, loud enough to shake the windows of buildings along the block, possibly even breaking some. Brennan staggers back in obvious pain before fleeing into the safety of the club, howling in anger. Further investigation can reveal that the priest is, in fact, an Episcopal minister named Terence Coleman, from Gary, who helps run many of the city's homeless shelters. Attempts to approach the minister himself are extremely difficult for any of them, a sense of dread and pain washing over them when they get within 5 feet of the man, and even more severe difficulty trying to speak with him. For his part, Terence has no idea what actually happened and has never encountered a Kindred before, or why Brennan reacted as he did. He felt a warmth spread through his hand when he touched the man, and believes that he must have given him a startling shock from static electricity to elicit such a reaction. He is not even there as part of the protest, and he doesn't see the blood dolls differently from any subculture that is coming on in his life. He simply was curious to see what was going on, and as he had caught wind of all the gossip about the blood dolls from others in Gary. He just happens to be a truly faithful and compassionate man. His unbending belief led him to possess what some Kindred describe as true faith. Before long, the coterie is approached by the club's manager, and they are told that Brennan wishes to speak with him. The mood within the club is tense and starting to get ugly. Many of the anarchs and punks have come up from the basement to see, and seem about ready to go outside and start trouble, and the bouncers are on edge. Scene 2. Devils Within. Brennan has called all nearby Kindred to meet with him. The coterie is joined by Portia, Genghis, and Sir as Brennan paces, filled with rage. If the coterie manage to speak with Terence, he grills them for what they talked about, wanting to learn anything he can about the man. He continues to rant for a time, and any protest against him talking of getting rid of the man will cause him to come unhinged and scream at them. He insists that everyone must work towards slaying the minister, declaring that they are a threat to all Kindred should they continue to exist, asking who will rid them of this man. Genghis is the first to step forward and join with him. Though he took great satisfaction in seeing Brennan tear through the club like the devil was on his heels, he recognizes the threat this individual may pose to all Kindred. Sir also joins in. As though he bore concerns of the risk to the masquerade from such an act, it is clear the man poses a real danger to them, and something must be done. Only Portia remains silent, uncertain what the priest is actually capable of, and none of the other 3 seem to notice that she is even there. Brennan instead turns to the coterie and asks where they stand. If the group had spoken with Terence, they may choose to go against the other Kindred at this time, though doing so will put the weight of the Ventrue and the Anarchs against them, as they will likely not be welcomed back into the Succubus Club, or possibly even Chicago, for some time after these events. There is a great degree of peer pressure at work here from these and other Kindred, though speaking to some privately may be able to sway them. Should they choose to side with them, they immediately plan how to take the man out, with the 3 not being able to agree on a method. Brennan wants something violent and bloody to send a message and get revenge for the pain he was subjected to. Genghis wants to kidnap the man and torture him for answers, and Sir thinks it should be done quickly and quietly to help preserve the masquerade. They ultimately rely upon the group to choose and insist that they carry it out, as they are a strong coterie who will be able to see it done. Any attempt to bring Portia into the conversation brings derision from the other 3, who still bear a fair amount of sexism from their mortal lives and believe her to be a useless neonate. Portia herself will demur and claim to not have been around long enough to be of use. During the meeting, the protesters enter the club and begin causing problems with the patrons, and the situation is quickly spiraling out of control. Protesters gather on the dance floor and stare disapprovingly at everyone, while blood dolls and punks begin to push their way onto it as well and begin to slam dancing and intentionally knocking into them. Elsewhere, several fights are near to breaking out. To make matters worse, Terence Coleman has entered the club as well and is walking around conversing with patrons. After speaking with a number of blood dolls, his opinions of them being comparable to past subcultures is reinforced. Outside of who he speaks to directly, most seem to actively shy away from him, and the few who seem intent to do him harm turn away before anything happens, a sudden change of heart coming over them. Scene 3. Choice Friends. The coterie's choice will greatly change this scene. If they go along with the plan to kill Terence Coleman, Genghis is likely to tag along. Making a plan will be far easier than executing said plan, however. Coleman will constantly be speaking with mortals throughout the club, and despite the tense and aggressive nature of the place, with all the protesters present, those the man speaks to will be left with a sense of ease and peace. Even those initially hostile with him are won over by his calm and gentle nature. In addition, Coleman's nature provides him certain protections. Not only will most kindred have difficulty approaching him at all, he also receives unconscious warnings of danger and further protections should trouble actually break out. Most attempts to kill the priest will not go well. Various options, mugging, sniper, hired gunman, poison, horde of ghouled pigeons, etc., are all hindered by the protections his nature provides, his way with people, and the state of tensions in the club, not to mention the healthy contingent of police outside. Murphy's Law, stating whatever can go wrong will go wrong, is in action around the man as though applied to him like a hex against others. In addition, any attempt on his life is almost guaranteed to cost humanity, making his effect against Kindred even harder to resist. On the other hand, abandoning such plots and befriending Coleman can yield impressive opportunities for the coterie. He is unlikely to believe the group are vampires, barring some extreme display, but will aid them nonetheless. Though they potentially will no longer be welcome in the club, and a number of factions in the city will be out for them, Coleman offers a link to powerful forces in Gary, and knows enough of the city's influential people, despite knowing nothing of the Kindred, that he can aid with nearly any issue in that domain. It is even possible for a Kindred to become used to his holy aura after being exposed to it for long enough, make it harder for them to frenzy in his presence, and even be a possible path to increasing one's humanity. If he can be convinced of the existence of vampires, he may even prove an incredible asset in the path to achieving Golconda, and prove to be a source of grace and forgiveness for acts that may have been committed up to this point. More importantly to the immediate events, there is a chance he can help reveal the truth behind the protesters and how they came to target the club in the first place, though it will take some strong detective work. If Genghis tagged along, he'll continuously try to convince the characters to kill the man, and Brennan can be spotted watching on in displeasure. By 2 a.m., if the man is not dead, the group will be summoned to the venture once more. At this point, Brennan will realize the protesters themselves are the bigger concern, but will still rail against the priest as being their leader. The only way to potentially avoid his wrath is if they found the truth behind the protesters and provide him with the details about what's happening. This will reduce his ire for both Coleman and the coterie by a large amount, and he will no longer push for the man's death, instead beginning to plot his revenge. If Brennan is not turned from this course, both he and Sir will make attempts to kill the priest if the coterie has not. These attempts will also fail, and even should the coterie try and fail to end him, Coleman will likely be injured or become scared enough to run to the police. This will put him in contact with Detective Gregory Stevens, and their meeting will spark a partnership as vampire hunters that will have dire consequences for the kindred of the city. He will not have seen the struggle of the vampire in a different light, and know them only as dark, murderous creatures, and he will devote himself to this task with all the power that true faith offers him. What is really going on? The protesters being from Gary is no coincidence. Though Modius is subdued to a point he is unlikely to move against Chicago any longer, a number of jabs directed at him and his lack of influence by other kindred in a recent planning session went too far for his taste. Determined to prove he can still be a threat if he desires to be, he began to subtly dominate a number of northern Indiana evangelists, leading them to regularly denounce the Blood Dolls subculture on radio and television. As they are primarily focused around the nightclubs of Chicago, the city became the target of sermons and similar focuses, and with it the condemnations of the perceived city of sin reached a fever pitch. At this point, Modius arranged for the First Unity Baptist Church of Gary congregation to stage a protest at the ultimate den of iniquity, the Succubus Club. Modius has a particular dislike for Brennan Thornhill, and as a child of Loden, the move is all the sweeter. The protest will bring television coverage and put a subtle strain on the masquerade in the city, potentially bringing the Camarilla's attention down on Loden and his brood. However, in typical fashion for Modius, his attention did not carry through once he got the ball rolling. Aside from hiring additional protesters to make the demonstration look larger than it actually was, he had little involvement by that point and just assumed that things would go his way. Unknown to him was the Episcopal minister with an intensely powerful holy aura that puts the masquerade at far more risk than he ever intended. Characters. Purvis Ramsley. Once a prominent steelworker in Gary, even as the layoffs began, his skill left him with little worry that he would be part of their number. Then the day eventually came when he, too, was let go. Still, he knew his skill would land him another plant any time, and lived off his unemployment benefits while he continued to look for work. After 3 months, it seemed as if this was more than a slump, and the industry may truly be in dire straits, and began to expand his search for work. By the time 6 months had passed, with no prospects, his benefits had run dry, his car was repossessed, and he was evicted from his home. Swallowing his pride, he temporarily moved into a homeless shelter as he kept seeking work. That was almost a year ago. Now desperate for any money he can get, the sudden boon of $20 to join a protest from a mysterious, well-dressed man was an absolute godsend. He was not the only one, and in total 20 homeless men were sent to Chicago with the church protesters. Terrence Coleman. From a young age, it was clear to Terrence's parents that he was different. He spoke of seeing fairies in the woods and claimed to speak with angels, and eventually others began to worry that this was much more than a phase. But eventually such claims ended and life moved on. However, these occurrences did not end. Terence simply stopped saying anything because he was tired of not being believed. The angels revealed to him that his calling in life was to help others, and he found that, by doing so, fulfilled him on a fundamental level. Initially, he was determined to become a doctor, but after working for much of his early life in a hospital, realized that most of the patient's wounds began before their physical harm, and began searching for something that would help him prevent them from happening in the first place. After college, he took up a bicycle trip through Europe and felt as though something was guiding him the whole time, the feeling intensifying with each place he visited. Upon returning to the U.S., he solidified his plans and set out on his journey to become a priest. Settling in Gary, he opened numerous homeless shelters and volunteers at still others and aids in multiple community programs. Not only can he help the people he goes to, there are plenty that come directly to him for help, and he knows that he is truly helping them deal with the core of their problems. He has also taken a hand in civic matters, and as his congregation and following grow, many have begun to believe if Gary has a chance of surviving, it will in large part be due to his helping hands. His true faith manifests in a variety of ways as described previously, and all supernatural creatures find him very difficult to approach. Death's sweet sting. So when this corruption shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 54-55. Scene 1. Smokin' in the boys' room. It's a late night like any other at the Succubus Club, and things are relatively calm, for the first few hours at least. Around 1 a.m. a disturbance occurs and a crowd gathers around the men's bathroom. As the group approaches, it is learned that a dead man has been found in the bathroom. A man stands out in the crowd appearing disturbed at this turn of events, but before he can be approached, the group is summoned to the scene by Brennan. Examining the body, it can be seen that their throat has been torn out, carotid artery exposed, though there is a distinct lack of blood on the floor. As the one who discovered the body was immortal, the cops will soon be on the scene, so there's only a brief time to examine the body without interference. The man is Isaac Osiecki, from Des Moines according to his license. He carries 2 crumpled black and white photos of a young man in his coat pocket, and most notably has in his possession a mallet, a wooden stake, and a clove of garlic, making it very likely he was a vampire hunter of some sort. The police appear within minutes and clear the scene. Among them is Detective Gregory Stevens, who is convinced a number of the people he believes to be vampires frequent the club and is anxious to learn if this killing is related to them. If one of the characters had fed in the bathroom at some point in the night, they are likely to become a suspect, and regardless, Stevens will soon become more and more of a hassle for Brennan and the club, though Brennan will manage to convince the cops that the murder is not directly related to the club itself. Once the police are done and the body taken away, the club is closed down, though Brennan will pull some strings to have it reopened the next night. He will put word out that he seeks the Kindred who perpetrated these acts and offer a sizable reward for their capture. In addition, if the coterie did not already track him down, the strange man they noticed in the crowd the night before will approach them. His name is Saul Osiecki, father of the victim, and he reveals he knows the vampire responsible for the murder, but that they are incredibly dangerous. Though he is a hunter, he is willing to join in an uneasy alliance to see the culprit brought down. He notes that their safety will hinge upon his own, but that his story should tell them all they need to know about the situation as it stands. Saul's story. Saul was once a young and promising microbiologist who had gained attention in his home country of Poland, though he was only 20. Then the war came with Hitler's invasion of his home, and like others of Jewish heritage, Saul was sent to a, quote, relocation camp. For 5 years, Saul persevered through the horrors of Treblinka, and in that time learned a dark truth of the world. The insurmountable deaths these camps brought about attracted another kind of evil. Some of the more desperate or deranged of the kindred saw opportunity in places where there was so much death. What was one more amid such numbers? Cloaked in shadow or disguised in uniform, these creatures would gorge themselves on the victims of the camps, and Saul himself was chosen to be among them, watching a Gestapo colonel feast as he waited to be the next victim. Then an Allied bombing run struck the camp, and he was forgotten in the confusion after being returned to his cell, but Saul did not forget. In his mind, these creatures took on a new light. He convinced himself that they must be the real reason for this war, for all this death. He vowed then that should he survive, he would become an avenging angel for all those who suffered and take the fight to these creatures, finding a way to end them for good. Through some miracle, Saul did survive. After the war, he immigrated to America and soon married another Polish immigrant, having a son and 2 daughters. He worked as a biochemist and excelled, eventually being promoted to head of the biochemical division at a plant in Des Moines. But he never forgot his vow, and quickly learned that the creatures could be found in America as well. He spent his spare time learning all he could about them, gathering information but never acting on it, waiting instead while he worked to perfect his master plan. Killing a handful of kindred he came across was not enough. He wished to eradicate the entire species. And what better way to do that than with disease? To this end, he managed to develop a strain of mononucleosis, one that left humans ill, but would kill kindred. In time, he found a guinea pig by the name of Arthur Gonzalez, and it was through his blood that Saul developed his virus. When Arthur appeared in his city, Saul managed to trap him when he was in a weakened state and extract some of his blood before releasing him. He then learned that the creature fed primarily on the homeless population of Des Moines, so when his virus was ready, he introduced it into one of the homeless shelters he was known to frequent and waited. Soon Arthur fed on an infected host, and Saul observed to see how it would affect him. To his horror, the vampire did not die, but became far more aggressive, killing on a whim and acting irrationally. When Arthur took off for Chicago, Saul chose to follow him with his son Isaac, tracking the trail of carnage that was left in the man's wake. It was clear something had gone horribly wrong. This behavior was not anticipated, and it was taking far too long to kill him. By the time they reached Chicago, they determined that they must put an end to Arthur. That fateful night, they tailed the man to the Succubus Club and split up to look for him. But Arthur had caught wind of what they were doing, and when Isaac entered the restroom, Arthur attacked and killed the young man, escaping shortly after. Saul now fears the effects of such a disease spreading to other kindred, creating insatiable monsters by the hundreds that will turn to uncontrollable killing machines, and the countless death toll that would follow. He determined that he would need the aid of other kindred to stop Arthur before the situation could get even further out of hand. Saul does not trust the kindred, however, and will only tell as much of his story as he must to convince them to help, possibly hiding the existence of the disease and only noting Arthur's path of carnage that led him there. However, he will hint that there is more to what's going on, and if they want the full story, he must live. Indeed, all the kindred in the city may require the information he has. Though now a bitter old man, Saul is smart and will likely be one step ahead of the kindred at any time. He holds no value in their existence and can be unnerving to be around. His main weakness is that he does not know as much about how the kindred work as he thinks he does, believing in many of the old myths about crosses, stakes, and garlic, as one of the kindred he had captured to experiment on during his life believed in these things. Scene 2. Free Fallen. It is determined that Arthur will likely return to the club, so the group begins to keep watch on the place. 2 days after the first murder, he reappears, though there will be a number of false alarms or red herrings in the meantime, one of which will occur around the time the man makes his next move. While distracted by that, Arthur strikes again on one of the hanging dance floors, draining his victim dry in plain sight. He is barely recognizable from the small black and white photos that Saul and Isaac had of the man. Extremely gaunt, sallow, and unkempt, the disease that burns through him has nearly run its course. As he finishes draining the woman, he shoves her body over the railing and onto the floor many feet below. While the other patrons look to the body, a powerful leap sends him soaring to the rafters above, where he breaks a window and escapes onto the rooftops of Chicago. The coterie will be alerted to the events by the screams of the crowd, and if Saul is nearby, he will point out Arthur, declaring that he is the one they're after. With this act, the problem becomes twofold. There is now a body lying broken on the floor that bears 2 clear puncture marks on their neck, with blood leaking from them, not to mention anyone on the dance floor above that saw what happened. If Detective Stevens is able to examine the body, the masquerade will be in even more jeopardy than it is already. In addition, the culprit is now fleeing the scene via the rooftop, and will need to be followed quickly if there is any hope of catching him. The group will likely need to split up. For now, the bouncers are able to keep the crowd at bay, blocking the body from too much scrutiny, but the cops had a patrol parked outside in case the murderer returned, and will be present in just a few short minutes. Brennan has been called for, but is at least 15 minutes away. The members of the coterie who stay behind can try to do something about the body, or try to slow the cops, while another kindred takes care of it. Most likely, someone will have to tear open the throat to obscure the puncture marks, and make it appear like the other murder. Detective Stevens will arrive a few minutes after the police clear the area around the body, but will only have his continued hunches to rely on if the fang marks were covered up properly. Anyone who handled the body, however, will have been in direct contact with the disease that is affecting Arthur. Stevens will speak to Brennan, and the club will be closed down once more, this time for a week. Scene 3. Cat on a hot tin roof. The rest of the coterie that did not stay behind give chase, pursuing Arthur by whatever means that they have as he attempts to evade their pursuit while making his way back to his lair. The race culminates in a standoff in an abandoned tenement that Arthur has been staying in. The building is 3 stories, and they follow him in from the roof. As they search the building, they are immediately hit with a horrid stench of decay. Arthur has been bringing the bodies of his victims here, and they litter the various rooms of the building in varying states of decay. By this point, Arthur has become little more than a mindless monster as the disease nears the end of its course within him. Arthur is holed up on the 2nd floor of the building, where he typically sleeps, in a room that is completely blacked out with paint and other means. If they were not sufficiently stealthy, he'll be hanging above the door and drop on the first person to enter the room, slashing at them wildly with his claws before dashing into the pitch-black room. He is able to see in the dark through the use of one of his disciplines and will continue to lash out at random group members, dealing damage before retreating again to hide somewhere. Just as it seems like Arthur has the upper hand, however, an ear-shattering scream rips through the air and he begins to thrash about wildly, flinging himself around the room and writhing in pain. He grabs at one of the group, looking into their eyes as final death claims him. An examination of his corpse, before it begins to rapidly decay, will reveal he is even paler than most Kindred in places, but seems abnormally flush in others. There is a crust of white gunk built up around his eyes, and it is clear that he had not been cleaning himself regularly. The rest of the building reveals only more corpses. Interlude. Left with more questions than answers, and their only suspect dead, the coterie regroups and will likely wish to question Saul. This will not be difficult to do, as though he is overjoyed that Arthur is no longer a threat, this feeling is short-lived. Saul sees the early symptoms of the disease in the coterie. By this point, the mononucleosis strain has spread throughout the city, and it will not be very long before every Kindred in the city ends up infected. His fears may yet come to fruition as he realizes it may be too late to contain the virus. Soon the coterie will fatigue more easily, and find it harder and harder to wake up until long after the sun is set, and the beast slowly begins to take control of more and more of their choices. At this point, Saul reveals the whole truth of what led to these events. Normally, extended bed rest is enough to get rid of the virus, but the changes he made to it, in addition to the fact that the Kindred have no immune system, means this will not work and he has no idea how to stop it, though as the virus's creator, he will be of immense help to anyone who can develop something to fight it. But this raises a dilemma. Who can they turn to? A Kindred cannot go to a normal doctor for fear of breaking the masquerade. Within a few short days, however, more and more Kindred begin to display symptoms, and it leaves little choice. They must seek out a virologist who may be open-minded enough to accept their existence and also be willing to aid them. With this in mind, they turn to the University of Chicago. Scene 4. See me, feel me, touch me, heal me. After a desperate search, the coterie discovers Dr. John Phillips, a world-renowned virologist at the university. There are many avenues through which to acquire this information, including but not limited to Scotty Cartwright, the reporter contact from Tell It All that we met back in Ashes to Ashes when trying to discover information about Rourke and his cult. Working with Dr. Phillips will require maintaining a control that may be hard depending on how long they've been dealing with the virus. Anything but peaceful encounters will likely lead to dire consequences and ultimately destruction. Even threats of violence against him may result in him creating a serum that only masks the symptoms but will still allow the virus to destroy them. The first step will be getting to the doctor. Luckily, many researchers often work late into the night and the campus security is relatively light. If allowed to assist, Saul will even be willing to set up an appointment with him during the day to help out. Phillips has been working with viruses for a number of years, and though it will take some work to convince him vampires are real, he will quickly become fascinated with them, in particular the fact that they may be susceptible to illness. If Saul accompanies the group, he will also be greatly impressed with his biochemical knowledge, and the old man will prove a great asset in coming up with a vaccine. As he runs tests on them, he becomes more and more fascinated with their state of being, though he is not able to figure out how they are still, quote, alive, though their bodies are clearly not. He is, however, able to isolate the virus strain that is causing their illness. The process will take a great deal of trust on the part of the Kindred, and risk the beast rearing its head all the more for it, and ultimately the doctor proves to not be entirely altruistic himself. Having isolated the virus, he now has leverage. He can cure it, but he desperately desires the ability to study vampires further. Though he can be talked or threatened down from wanting to publish papers about his findings and go public with his knowledge, he is immovable on the subject of wanting to study them further in exchange for the vaccine. Once a deal is struck, he will begin work on the cure. This will take as much as a week, but with Saul's help will be achievable in 3 days. Once the vaccine is taken, the illness will clear up within 30 minutes and the Kindred will no longer be sick. However, there is an unforeseen issue at hand that neither the group or the doctor realize at first. As Kindred have no immune systems, once they have used up the blood they currently have in them, they will once more be susceptible to the virus and need to be vaccinated again. Something that further cements Philip's position to get what he wants at his safety. There is also the matter of ensuring the rest of the Kindred in the city get vaccinated, and the Coteries' direct involvement in procuring it is likely to be a substantial reward from Prince Loden for their efforts. There are a number of loose threads to pull on at the end of this story as well. The Succubus Club will be under heavy scrutiny by the police for years going forward from these events, and Detective Stevens is likely to turn up at the worst of times. The virus will, due to being transmissible by humans, spread to other cities and countries around the world, and the vaccine for it will quickly become priceless. Loden is sure to capitalize on this situation, and protecting Dr. Phillips from outside forces will become direly important. Saul may give up on his crusade if he was treated well and he saw the humanity in the Kindred, losing his certain belief that they are all evil, but if he was treated poorly, it may galvanize him further, though he is unlikely to use the virus again. Moreover, all the victims left in Arthur's wake could see a whole slew of new hunters begin to appear. Taken to extremes, the story could also extend or include more details such as Saul seeing this as a mere setback to his plans and developing further strains, using the coterie as test subjects while they hunt Arthur. Saul being a pawn of Menelaus who came to be aware of his research and the virus's deployment was a means to weaken or kill Helena, since he is safe from it while in torpor. Saul and Phillips being killed to ensure the sanctity of the masquerade. The coterie could keep the vaccine for themselves, forcing Kindred everywhere to try and find the cure on their own, or potentially lead to a full-on apocalyptic scenario where enraged vampires roam the streets combated by crews of hunters as the world collapses around them. Clearly, many of these scenarios don't fit in the ultimate continuity of the series, but lead to some interesting possibilities nonetheless. As a side note, virus and vaccine are interchangeable a few times during some of these suggestions, making for some amusing, if a bit confusing, descriptions of possible events. Mononucleosis vampirilla. Little is truly known about how vampires function on a biological level, so the exact reason the virus strain works on them, when most do not, is not entirely clear. The prevailing theory is that the virus attaches to the hemoglobin molecule in the blood, something a living body prevents or hinders due to other cells produced in the body. As vampires do not have this protection, the virus causes the molecule to swell and block osmosis of blood throughout the body and ultimately slowing the flow of blood in the Kindred. The result is reduction and or loss of many of the Kindred's higher brain functions, functionally untethering the beast from their humanity and letting it run unrestrained. As time goes on, the swelling intensifies until the flow through the body is stopped completely, resulting in final death. This process takes approximately a month. Child's Play Part 1. Paper Chase. And all our knowledge is, ourselves to know. Alexander Pope. Essay on Man. Scene 1. For Sale. This story opens at a point when the coterie has found themselves to be relatively stable and complacent with their situation. It is then, while at the Succubus Club, they are approached by a young, almost cadaverous young man with a vacant look in his eyes. He acts as though he knows them, but seems to not entirely see anything going on around him. He hands them a small package wrapped in brown paper and tells them that a guy told him to give it to them before wandering off once more. Inside the package is a small but very expensive-looking notebook with an aged leather cover. A note falls from it when opened. On the note, in a very precise and calligraphy-like handwriting, is a message from a man named Dennis Hurden, who insinuates heavily that he knows who the group is and that he will soon come into possession of an ancient manuscript that seems to date back to the 14th century, though the contents of it appear to be pre-biblical, and is the apocrypha to a book they know only by name, the Book of Nod. He notes that such a tome would be of inestimable value in one's search for Golconda. When the Apocrypha becomes available for purchase, he will contact them again, and that they are welcome to keep the gift the note was delivered in. It is clear that this man knows of the existence of vampires. The information in this manuscript could provide is enticing, but they must learn more about this man first. Attempts to interrogate Russ, the person who delivered the package, proves fruitless. He knows nothing about Dennis, or where the package actually came from. It becomes clear rather quickly that he was under the effects of Dominate, and the last thing he remembers is looking through albums in a specialty music shop before coming to the club. Some additional info can be gleaned should one of them have a strong talent for Auspex, but they can also check with any contacts that they have in the city at this point. Many Kindred have worked with Herden, particularly those who are part of the art world. He has a shady reputation and has been known to deal in stolen goods. Despite this, there has never been even a hint that he might deal in forgeries. Above all, none know how to actually contact him. It is he that contacts those who he wishes to sell items to. Contacts that have ties to the police or the underworld know him in a different light. His reputation comes from the fact that he is an international fence, though no evidence has ever been found to actually pin anything on him. He has a faint Welsh accent and fine clothes that never quite seem to fit him properly. Through these means, a general area of the city he resides in and a phone number can be acquired, but it leads to an answering machine that picks up after one ring with no outgoing messages attached to it. As to the Apocrypha, even vampires such as the Anarchs, who often do not believe in the tales of Cain and the Antediluvians, have at least heard of the Book of Nod. A few vampires may even have read some of the scraps that are said to survive, but none the coterie can find have ever heard of an Apocrypha for it, though as even the mortal Bible has apocryphal texts, there is a precedent. Even if it's not legitimate, such a text still holds immense potential value in the Kindred world. It becomes clear quickly that spreading word of such a thing is not advisable, and they will be told as much by any they reveal this information to. Those who are close to them or like them out of a genuine concern, those who may not have their best interests at heart because they will covet the item themselves and want to reduce the amount of competition for it. Too much indiscretion is likely to create a feeding frenzy of Kindred all seeking to claim the prize for themselves. Scene 2. Midnight Meeting. With some luck and skillful investigation, it may be possible for the group to ascertain Herden's whereabouts. They may also leave a message and number to call on the answering machine, and he will call them back, but be reluctant to set a meeting early without there being something in it for him. Pressing him on details about the item will have him insist on discretion, as the phone lines may not be secure, and that those with your background should know better. This, along with the things that he said previously, will once more give them the impression that he knows of the Kindred. If handled properly, an early meeting may be possible. The meeting will be set at an Italian restaurant where Herden knows the owner and staff and can get assistance from 2 well-built waiters if things go sideways for him. He eats there often and always in a private room in the back where he sometimes entertains guests. Despite insinuations to the contrary, Herden does not actually know that the characters are vampires, nor that such exist. Much of his allusions were simply to imply that they too deal in stolen goods, and he got their names from a man he knows only as Dix, an old customer of his who told them as much. References to Golconda were believed to be the name of a mythical country, and Dix told him that the group was interested in verifying the historical authenticity of it, something Herden thinks of as being like the search for Atlantis. Dix instructed Herden to send the message to the group and sent a courier to do so whom he remembers little about, only that it was a young boy of about 13, clearly not the one who did the final delivery. He was led to believe that they are rich, how else could they afford such an artifact, and a bit eccentric. Herden does not know much about Dix, and he is unwilling and uninterested in prying. He pays well, has impeccable taste, and speaks in a high pitch and with a pronounced Eastern European accent. It would be unwise to dig further. Herden notes that he has verified the authenticity of the Apocrypha and that it comes with a certificate of provenance provided by the Central Library of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. Having seen material through them before, he accepts this one as authentic and believes the price for the piece will fall somewhere in the range of $750,000. His standard broker's fee is 15%. He is unwilling to discuss the sellers or how to contact them, fearing enterprising buyers may attempt to cut out the middleman. He knows them by the names Solace and Tomba, and has only met them once and contacts them via leaving messages with a local phone number. He does not know where they are staying in the city or why they are there beyond selling the item. As with Dix, he could likely learn more, but could not care less as long as the item they offer is authentic. Scene 3. Other players in the game. As it is very unlikely that they have the amount of money that would be needed to buy the Apocrypha, the coterie decides trying to track down Solace and Tomba is the best course of action, though they have little to go on with only names, basic descriptions, and a phone number to work with. One possible avenue of investigation is to acquire the address tied to the phone numbers through whatever means available to them. This leads them to a long empty house in Newtown, where they discover an answering machine that can be accessed remotely via phone. In the mailbox is a note from a realtor, Marcia Laudette, that indicates someone has bought or is renting the place. Finding Marcia, it can be learned that the place was rented by a Mr. Smith for a European friend. The description of Mr. Smith indicates that he is likely Solace, and the group may be able to get his address from the woman through methods of coercion or disciplines. The address leads to a condominium, also in Newtown, and is the true location of where the sellers are staying. In addition, depending on how indiscreet the coterie were when investigating the Apocrypha earlier, any number of kindred may start shadowing them, trying to learn more or have the group lead them to the Apocrypha. At the very least, a Toreador known as Edge and his child Stephanie will be doing so, as they also learned of the Apocrypha from Herden, whom Edge has worked with before. Aside from the supernatural, it will likely be noticed that a number of street thugs may be keeping tabs on or following the group at any given time as well, though if caught, the thugs do not know who hired them, but descriptions will match those of the Apocrypha's sellers. The number they had to contact was the same as the one that Herden had for the answering machine in the empty house. Scene 4. Hunters and Hunted. This scene can go a couple of different ways based on what all the coterie was able to learn and how quickly they move. If they slip up and display vampiric powers, and one of the thugs tailing them sees it, there's a strong chance their haven will get raided, and they'll be put into a potentially lethal situation. Conversely, if their investigation into the sellers of the Apocrypha goes well and they act on the information immediately and visit the address acquired from the realtor, they will learn the truth of things. Solace and Tomba are, in fact, ex-Jesuit hunters that have become experts at luring vampires into a position to be killed, and have become exceedingly skillful at this practice. If they have any hint that the coterie is onto them, they will hire additional guards and will prepare to leave the next day. They have an extensive knowledge of how Kindred work, and will not take any chances without first verifying the group is what they believe them to be, and will pull out if they feel that they may be in danger. The condo they stay in is highly fortified, with bars on the windows and door, and they sleep during the day, keeping vigil at night to avoid being surprised. Even so, it would be best to face them at the coterie's discretion, and not let them pick the time and place they strike. What is really going on? When the coterie first arrived in Chicago, Nikolai took notice of them immediately. Always on the lookout for new pawns to advance the schemes of the Tremere, he decided to test the group at the first available opportunity and see how competent they were. Were they predictable or true wild cards? Soon enough, just such an opportunity presented itself. A pair of ex-Jesuit hunters who had been disturbingly proficient at killing kindred across Europe, and now the U.S., have recently arrived in Chicago. He is in the unique position of knowing about their arrival when no other kindred does, and finds it the perfect opportunity. In truth, this idea may not be his own, but one provided by Helena, whom he has become a pawn of. Solace and Tomba, the two hunters, have a tactic they perfected to lure out kindred for them to slay. They spread word of an item of great value to their kind, the Apocrypha to the Book of Nod, coming up for sale through a variety of middlemen, in this case, Dennis Herden. Nikolai has used Herden in the past for purchases, so when the opportunity comes up, he recognizes it as a ruse used by the hunters and instructs Herden to contact the neonates he wishes to test with the offer. He can then watch to see how they react to the situation. If they are able to uncover and defeat the hunters, they will prove valuable pieces in the games he plays in the city. If they fail and are destroyed by the hunters, there is no particular loss to him or the other kindred of Chicago. Unbeknownst to Nikolai, however, is that Herden has informed another of the supposed Apocrypha, a Toreador known as Edge. He and his child wish to possess it for themselves in an attempt to increase their standing with the other Toreador. If the group manages to defeat the hunters, Nikolai will be impressed and see the value of the coterie. The Apocrypha itself will easily be proven to be fake if examined closely enough. It uses the right terminology and speaks of things it would be expected to, but seems off somehow, and trying to follow its advice about Gokanda may actually lead one further from that path. They may try to use the item as leverage or sell it to another before anyone knows better, but word will quickly spread that it is a fake, and all will quickly lose interest. It is Nikolai who will spread this info, wanting to be sure the young vampires cannot upset the balance of power in the city. Characters. Russ Smellings. Russ is a typical 19-year-old and heavily into sex, drugs, and rock and roll above all else, though his abysmal social skills tend to leave the first of those entirely off the table. He is almost always drunk or high on something and knows nothing of Kindred existence. He was dominated by Nikolai to deliver the message and package to the coterie simply because he had been nearby when someone was needed and has no connection to the story beyond unwitting messenger. Dennis Herden. A consummate professional with an expert's knowledge of antiques, art, and other items of antiquity, he is extremely well connected with the underworld in the U.S. and has a reputation for always following through on what he promises. Despite his professional demeanor, he always has the look of someone who just woke up after having slept in his clothes regardless of how nice they are, and his suits never seem to quite fit him. Edge. In life, Edge was a saxophonist comparable to the great Charlie Park. His future sire, a toreador named Ted Zinkin, found him late one night drunk in an alley playing his sax and became enraptured. Becoming the musician's patron, he made attempts to steer the man toward a better path, but he was a consummate drinker and would readily use any other substance that came his way. To make matters worse, he was an obnoxious drunk who loved to get into fights, and the Kindred found himself following Edge more and more just to make sure he didn't start a fight with the wrong person. One night, Ted proved to be too slow in this endeavor when Edge took umbrage with a large man in a bar and came away with a knife in his gut. Ted found him as he was coughing the last of his life's blood up and chose in that moment to embrace him. Since then, Edge has increased in skill immeasurably with his instrument, but rarely plays in public any longer. He was poor in life, and though he has now changed, his self-worth is tied heavily to perceiving those with money as better than him, and desperately seeks the Apocrypha to increase his standing in his clan. His substance abuse followed him into his vampiric life, and he feeds only on those under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Stephanie. Stephanie Bayliss was born and raised in Seattle and sang in her first jazz gig at the age of 16. By 20, she quit law school to focus on her music full-time and had a voice perfectly suited for jazz. Edge heard her once while passing through Seattle and became enraptured. From then, he began to follow her career and never missed a chance to hear her sing. In time, they became close friends, though she never knew of his true nature. At the age of 25, Stephanie was given only 6 months to live, having been diagnosed with cancer. Edge was horrified at learning this, taking an almost personal offense at an existence that would create such a beautiful voice and then deprive the world of it so quickly. It was at this point the saxophonist finally revealed his true nature to her, offering her the embrace. She spent a week thinking it over before accepting, and the two have been inseparable ever since. When Edge chose to move to Illinois, Stephanie followed. She is not bloodbound to him, but their feelings for one another run so deep that such a bond would be practically redundant. He would do anything to protect her, and she would do the same for him. She has little interest in the Apocrypha, but understands what it means to him, and will go to any lengths to help him acquire it. Warren Salas. From a young age, it was believed Warren Salas would join the priesthood. Raised in a very devout family and naturally gifted, the seminary steered him towards the Society of Jesus. In turn, the Jesuits saw his incredible gifts and expected great things from him. What was not noticed, however, was the single-mindedness of his qualities. He would latch onto things to the point of obsession, and it would nearly be impossible to pull him away from it. One of his aptitudes was with linguistic analysis, and through this he was brought in to assist a meeting between the Jesuit scholars and a group known as the Society of Leopold. The purpose was to glean information from a scrap of manuscript discovered from something known as the Book of Nod. Through this, Salas learned that vampires truly walk the earth, and decided then and there that he must work to destroy them, angered at his superior's attitude of study and slow decision. Swift attack was necessary for such an evil. During the meeting, he met someone of a like mind, a secretary to one of the Leopoldites named Alberto Tomba. Finding they agreed on the proper course of action, they both determined to quit their respective orders and set out together to face the creatures themselves. Since that meeting in 1983, the two have traveled across multiple continents, seeking out and destroying vampires wherever they found them. Intelligent and cautious, they plan carefully and surveil their intended target to ensure their guilt before moving on them. Despite his obsession, Salas is very patient and will wait until there is proof before acting. Alberto Tomba. Sharing a history incredibly similar to that of Solace, Alberto grew up in Palermo and joined the Society of Jesus in Rome. There he worked under a Portuguese brother named Alvido and learned much about art history and how to spot and create forgeries as they sifted through the Society's extensive art collections, rooting out any forgeries they could find. He was happy in this role, and at peace despite his tendencies towards strong emotion. In 1981, this peace was ended when he was attacked in his chambers by a vampire of Clan Malkavian. His faith was so great, however, that it drove the creature away. At this time, the Society of Leopold sought to recruit members from other Christian orders who had survived attacks by vampires, and Tomba quickly accepted. He served the Society for several years, but quickly became frustrated with their lack of action. After meeting Warren Solace in 1983, they joined forces to hunt the creatures that their two orders seemed unwilling to move against. Though most of the planning is done by Solace, it was Tomba who thought up and then created the Apocrypha and forged the Certificate of Providence for it. He is still prone to strong emotions and impulsive actions, but Solace proves to be a moderating force that keeps him in check. Child's Play Part 2, Grand Elusion. It's night. They might not see us, 'cause if they catch us out there, they'll bleed us. Shoot us, kill us, dump us in a dark ditch. Ice-T. Escape from the Killing Field. Eric's story. Though we met Eric Weiss, once known better as Harry Houdini in Ashes to Ashes, and learned some of his story there, this story focuses almost entirely on him, and as such we learn much more about him. Eric always had a fascination with the afterlife, and this only grew stronger after the death of his mother. He made attempts to contact her spirit, but was always skeptical of so-called mediums, and made a practice of debunking fake ones in the 1920s and 30s. He also corresponded with many others who took an interest in the occult, and through these means met Tracy Graves. Unknown to Houdini, Tracy was actually a Tremere kindred known as Erichtho. As we learned in Ashes to Ashes, Houdini was approached at the height of his career by a Tremere, not Erichtho, who offered him the embrace, and he accepted, faking his death to exit the mortal spotlight. Though he was taken to Vienna and bloodbound for the Tremere Council there, Houdini was determined not to be bound to any and threw himself into research. Through some means yet unknown, he discovered a way to break the bond. As he was active in New York at the time, many believe the Sabbat aided him with this, though he has never revealed the secret of it. It also appears it cannot be repeated, as attempts to aid Erichtho in breaking her bond to Nikolai have failed. The process to break his own took 4 years, and it was at that point that he faked his death and disappeared, determined to wander the world in search of answers to the afterlife. He found his existence as one of the Kindred was not what he expected, bound to nearly as many rules as he was while alive. Very few became Kindred in death, and though ghosts were thought to exist, he was still no closer to contacting them now than he had been before. He eventually found his way to Chicago, where he met Erichtho in person and discovered she was not only Kindred, but also a Tremere like he was, though still bloodbound to her sire. Though he did not stay, Eric found himself regularly returning to Chicago, but tried to stay out of the politics that pervaded the city. This lasted until Maldavis made her bid to take the city, and Erichtho talked him into giving aid, and he acted as a mediator between her and the anarchs whom she sought to aid. However, when push came to shove, he chose to abstain from what was happening, and in doing so earned the enmity of Tommy Hines and the anarchs that followed him, viewing Eric as a traitor. Eric soon began to wander again, and his actions in the city brought him to the attention of Nikolai, who informed his Tremere superiors and determined to hunt the renegade down, knowing that stopping the man would bring him much standing with his elders. He set traps for him in many areas of the city he was suspected to frequent, but always seemed to evade Nikolai's attempts to capture him. Ending the magician has now become a personal challenge to Nikolai. Though he began to wander again, Eric still returns to Chicago twice a year, and he still regularly corresponds with and occasionally meets Erichtho. Nikolai has grown suspicious of her, but she is protected by an amulet made by a magus that blocks all memories of him when Nikolai asks her about the man. He spends the rest of his time conversing with magi, many of whom know his true nature and are impressed by his ability to stay out of kindred squabbling. Eric has used his extended lifespan to learn much about the occult and afterlife, and believes that if the kindred, magi, and lycanthropes can put aside their petty feuds, they could come together and explore all the possibilities of the afterlife. This story begins after Eric has recently returned to the city, with his short appearance in Ashes to Ashes likely being early in this time back in town, which sees him visiting old haunts and seeking out old friends. Scene 1. A Night on the Town. On a typical but busy night at the Succubus Club, the coterie is approached by a pair of mortals known as Dave and Doug, who are very insistent about joining them for a meeting with their boss, who they refer to as the Kid. They say it is not far away and they will be walking there. It is clear they have guns, and they'd be more than happy to cause a scene if need be. The coterie can go with them or choose to fight. If they fight in the club, many of the kindred there will be displeased and they will ultimately get kicked out. They can find the two outside the club and they will not be much of a challenge, but it may be best to see what their boss really wants. He is located at the playground west of the club, and when asked to name him, they refer to him as Nicky Anton. They believe him to be the son of an eccentric rich guy who hired them to do the kids' every bidding. They know very little else, but in truth, their orders come directly from the child, who is more than he seems. Scene 2. An offer you shouldn't refuse. Arriving at the abandoned playground, they encounter a young boy who appears on one of the swings as if out of nowhere. He is almost mistaken for a ghost at first, but his seemingly out-of-place business suit, coupled with the aura of power that emanates from him, marks him as one of the kindred, a particularly old one at that. If Dave and Doug are still present, they will leave shortly after indicating to the boy that you've been brought as asked. If it is not clear to any of the group already, the boy will introduce himself as Nikolai, leader of the Tremere in the city, and one of the true rulers of Chicago. He indicates that he has a use for them, and for this reason commanded them to come to him. He is smug and unyielding, and though it may at first seem ridiculous coming from such a small child, what the coterie knows and feels of his power puts any such feelings to rest quickly. He goes on to indicate that there is a traitor to the Camarilla in the city who has thrown their lot in with the Sabbat and must be taken care of. He is elusive and knows many of the kindred in the city already, but as the group are newcomers, they may have a chance to get to him where others cannot. If they can get a jump on him and kill him, they will have the gratitude of not only one of the Primogen, but a leader of his clan. Nikolai will not reveal the target until they accept. If pressed for further reward, he will be willing to offer the secrets of thaumaturgy, but will refrain from mentioning that this will ultimately lead to their bonding to him as well. If pressed further, he will be willing to offer up vials of powerful elder blood, which he will also fail to mention is actually his own blood, and will also facilitate a bond to him. Should the group refuse, he will comment on them speaking as if they have a choice, and note that they may scorn the favor of a Primogen and elder, but they should consider long and hard before gaining the hostility of one. Upon eventually coming to an agreement, Nikolai will reveal the target as a kindred known as Eric, who will only be in town for a short time, and he must be killed that night. He frequents a bar known as the Cave. Producing a photo of Eric, he will quickly be recognizable as none other than Harry Houdini, and if the coterie encountered him during Ashes to Ashes, they are likely to remember him, though it is unlikely they spoke with or became friends with him. He notes that taking care of Eric will also bring the favor of the clan Tremere elders in Vienna as well as himself. Any attempts to attack Nikolai are futile. He will laugh and simply vanish or subdue the entire group within seconds of them acting with little effort. Scene 3. Pawns to Queen 4. The cave was first encountered in Ashes to Ashes along with its owner, the Malkavian Horace Turnbull. A description of the bar and more info on Turnbull can be found in my video on that book. This was also where we first met Eric, as well as the gangrel Tyrus and his biker gang. Entering the bar this time, the coterie encounters a different biker gang than the one Tyrus runs with. These are known as the Outlaws, and their leader is deep into a game of chess with Horace Turnbull, who soon defeats the other. After his defeat, the biker, Big Jim Slade, will turn to the coterie and ask what they want. With some effort, particularly if one of them has a punk or biker look about them, they can strike up a good rapport with the man and he'll challenge them to a game of chess. If asked about Eric, he will indicate that he knows him and insists on the game of chess to get to know them. If they perform at least moderately well against him in the match, he will be willing to speak with them, otherwise he will take to ignoring the group. Any attempts to sway him with disciplines will see interference by Horace, who will be upset at the flagrant disregard for the masquerade. If they do particularly poor in the match, they may also have the option of challenging him to a one-on-one fist fight, but will need to leave any disciplines out of this as well under Horace's watchful gaze, as well as that of the biker crew who will catch anything unbelievable from the coterie member that fights. Alternatively, dealing with Horace will also require a game of chess, but he will take much more to impress. Though the coterie have dealt with Horace previously in Ashes to Ashes, he is unlikely to give info on Eric's whereabouts easily as he is a friend, and Horace knows the Tremere hunt him for some reason. Regardless, if they are able to impress either of the two, they will eventually learn that Eric has been to the cave earlier that night, but he has since left and mentioned going to see an old friend in the loop. It is also recommended that if they need to see him as soon as possible to try Ye Old Magic Shop, as it is another place he often hangs out. Scene 4. Little Shop of Magic. Arriving at the Ye Old Magic Shop, the coterie encounters a building that looks like it came straight out of the 1800s. Despite the late hour, the shop is still open, though as they will soon find out, they once again just missed Eric. Entering, they find a shop that is filled to bursting with all kinds of magic related to books and props. There is a man in a rumpled white suit, wearing a camera and a tape recorder around his neck, who turns from what he's perusing to look at them as they enter, but before anything can be said, there's a loud noise and a puff of smoke emanates from behind a curtain where the cashier's counter is located, followed by coughing and wheezing as an old man steps out and introduces himself as Maxwell Dent, the shop owner. The best option here is to inquire about Eric and leave quickly, as the man in the suit is, in fact, Lowell Carlson, a reporter investigating rumors on the occult in the area, sent in on a tip from his friend, and a familiar name from Ashes to Ashes, Scotty Cartwright. He will attempt to listen in on and possibly record any conversations that are held, and even getting Maxwell to take you to a back room for conversation, he will continue attempting to eavesdrop, though he is easily found out and quickly retreats from the shop if confronted. Dent will make it clear quickly when able that he knows that the coterie are creatures of the night, and notes that he has knowledge of true magic and can help them with research or whatever they may need. However, they choose to frame their inquiry, either through lying about their intentions, the truth, or attempts at manipulation, etc. They learn that Eric was indeed there, but left due to the reporter lurking around, as he was afraid that he would be recognized, and learned that he was intending to meet a friend at the Succubus Club, and that he had left for there approximately a half hour before the group arrived. He notes that he needs to begin closing the shop, and there is not anything else for him to tell anyway. Scene 5. We've got magic to do. The coterie arrives at the Succubus Club around midnight, and it is even busier than it was earlier. It is here that they spot Eric sitting at a table near the main dance floor, accompanied by an elderly man in an old-fashioned business suit. Soon the group must decide if they intend to carry out Nikolai's wishes or not. Either way, doing anything publicly is unwise, so they approach the table, and after scrutinizing them for a moment, Eric invites them to join him. When they sit, he says, "Greetings, fellow Kindred. A friend of mine called from a business you visited earlier this evening. He said you were looking for me, and gave me your description. Well, you have found me. Perhaps you seek me at the request of the boy mage Nikolai. If so, realize you will be ill-used. He seeks to see me destroyed for the threat he believes I pose to the Tremere clan. As tools, he will discard you as soon as you have served your purpose. However, you have no doubt chosen your own fate. What is it that you wish of me?" It is at this point a decision must be made. If they do not wish to harm Eric, but explain their situation, Eric understands but notes that the Tremere are powerful schemers, and to go along with them will ensnare them in the webs they lay. He offers to let them join with him and others who stand against Nikolai, noting that they are not without power themselves. He notes that he must return his friend Gibson, the old man, home, and will return so that they can discuss what needs to be done. Though joining him is the most likely course of action, should they choose to carry out Nikolai's wishes anyway, Eric is disappointed, but understands, but notes that they should take what comes next outside, as he has no wish to break the masquerade. Regardless of the choice, or even if the coterie decides not to approach him yet, an event occurs. Sometime before he gets up, 2 blood dolls come out of the crowd. They have a vacant look in their eyes and draw knives, moving to attack Gibson, but Eric reacts with superhuman speed and grabs their wrists, stopping their attack and shoves them back into the crowd. Grabbing the old man and fleeing, they will attack anyone that gets in their way and act in utter silence, and most of the club do not even notice the attack happening. They have been commanded to kill the old man by someone named Orloff, who is nearby in the crowd. If it seems like they're going to fail, he will project a knife at Gibson in an attempt to kill him. Any attempts to catch the man are intercepted by additional mesmerized blood dolls as he ducks into the crowd to escape. Scene 6. Into the Maze. Turning with Gibson to escape, Eric notices the exits from the club are guarded. Anarchs under Tommy Hines have moved into place to prevent his escape, so instead they must turn toward the basement and attempt to shake their pursuit in the labyrinth. The coterie joins, or pursues, them in turn as the Blood Dolls and Orloff continue to pursue Gibson. In addition, a man known as Keaton, there at Nikolai's behest to ensure the coterie carries out his commands, will join the pursuit. He is joined by Dave and Doug from Scene 1. In the smoke-filled, dimly lit, and twisting corridors of the labyrinth, there are now only a couple of options available to the group: find another exit, or set up an ambush. Finding an exit facilitates a run-in with some of Hein's men, but as long as the violence sticks to basic melee and there is no overt vampiric powers, it is possible to fight them without drawing attention. If setting an ambush, the anarchs will still need to be dealt with. Doing this can remove one or both of the pursuits from Orloff and Keaton. However they choose to approach the situation, they are ultimately able to fight free of the club. Epilogue. The story can end in various ways depending on the choices made. Most likely, having sided with Eric, they will receive his aid and he may even remain in Chicago. He will put them in contact with Erichtho, who can help protect them and interfere with anything Nikolai may attempt to do in retaliation. She will also get in contact with Tommy Hines and his men and assure them the group was part of an elaborate scheme aimed at the Tremere and they will not be harassed by them further. Even if Keaton was killed during the encounter, word will eventually get back to Nikolai that the coterie betrayed him, but this whole situation has made him look bad with the Tremere elders, so he will be tied up by trying to appease them for some time. His memory is long, however. A Tremere character may need to jump through additional hoops to protect themselves due to their bond to the elders. If the group at least appeared to try and kill Eric, Nikolai will be impressed but will not award them due to their ultimate failure, though if the reward included a way for him to try to bond the characters, he may still provide it for, quote, trying their best. He will continue to use them in the future with the ultimate end of subjecting them to a blood bond. If the group actually tried to kill Eric but failed, he will spread the word to his allies and a number of doors on the side of the Anarchs will suddenly be shut to them. In addition, Horace Turnbull and Maxwell Dent will have nothing to do with them, and Erichtho will make attempts to have them killed. Hines and his men will still believe that they are allies of Eric, and take further opportunities to attack them if Erichtho is not there to clear up the confusion. Actually managing to kill Eric, though this is very unlikely, will see all the rewards Nikolai promised, and he will work all the harder to bond any non-Tremere members, realizing he truly underestimated their talents. Tremere coterie members will see themselves elevated in their clan. Characters. James Big Jim Slade. Big Jim is the leader of the local chapter of the Outlaws, a national motorcycle gang that is centered primarily in the Midwest. He has a love of the open road and no real desire to strive to be anything other than what he is, though he has the qualities of a great leader. His gang will stop at the cave anytime they are in Chicago, and he is old friends with Horace. It is also the only place he can indulge in one of his only vices, a good game of chess. It is an eccentricity that his followers tolerate mostly because he will beat them bloody if they try to make fun of him for it. Maxwell Dent. Maxwell has lived in Chicago his entire life, and became interested in the occult at a young age. He became friends with Houdini before he was embraced, and they kept in contact even after that and have remained friends. Dent is one of the few people who know that Eric is indeed Harry Houdini. Though he is not a true magus, his deep understanding of the occult means he often aids both Kindred and Magi when their own knowledge fails them. It should be noted that though his character sheet and bio give his first name as Maxwell, in the scene itself he introduces himself as Walter Dent. I have changed this as Maxwell appears more often. Lowell Carlson. Having been a reporter since his time serving in Vietnam, Lowell Carlson has had jobs at a variety of newspapers and wire services since then, and seems to have an uncanny knack for stumbling onto stories that powerful people want covered up. Though they are most often true, the details tend to be so wild that they are hard to believe, and pressure is put upon his employers to fire him. He has been in Chicago for 8 years now, and has stumbled upon numerous supernatural occurrences that he manages to get through unscathed purely by luck and tenacity. Despite that, his evidence always ends up destroyed, and he is left empty-handed for his stories. Though he has yet to encounter vampiric activity, he has become friends with Scotty Cartwright, and with the two comparing notes, it is only a matter of time before connections are made. Jackson Orloff. Jackson Orloff is a resident of Chicago who learned that he had an aptitude for magic at a young age. He was contacted by Gibson, who initiated the boy into his own magical order, where he was trained in the art of spellcasting. However, he soon grew impatient and felt that Gibson was holding him back from learning everything he could, and soon after began receiving punishments from the mystic order he belonged to for violating their vows about public spellcasting. Orloff has come to believe that by killing his mentor, the other magi will be forced to accept him as an equal. He is rude, impatient, and grows irate when things don't go his way. One of his particular talents is a spell that works similarly to blood bonding, and is how he has enthralled the blood dolls so easily. Gibson. Having been a magus since the age of 14, Gibson was once quite powerful, though that strength has waned in his old age. Despite this, he is still greatly respected by his fellow magi, and many believe his absent-mindedness and other eccentricities are an act, though this is not the case. It was due to this belief that Gibson was allowed to train Jackson Orloff, and despite his issues, was able to train the boy enough to be extremely dangerous. Eric and Gibson are old friends, and they are meeting purely for that sake. Eric just now learning of Gibson's increasing feebleness, and Gibson is not aware of Orloff's hate for him. Conclusion. With that, we reach the end of the Succubus Club. As you have seen, there is a lot of potential for such an iconic location in the world of darkness, and many opportunities to explore different kinds of stories within. They also serve as a good mix of utilizing the inhabitants of Chicago that we already know alongside some as-of-yet unseen faces. Of all the stories present, Player of Pawns and Child's Play were the ones I found the most interesting and feel like they utilize the deeper intrigues of Chicago best, though Annabelle's Party comes a close second. Fundamental Differences and Death's Sweet Sting were still interesting, but more like good examples of how far you can stretch the game in any direction you want to extrapolate out to various extremes of the setting, something we will occasionally see again down the road. Which story did you all like best? Let me know in the comments. There was a lot of different stuff to cover, so as is typical for me, this ended up much longer than I was expecting when I started. Luckily next time will be something not only a bit quicker, but also not set in Chicago or even part of the Forged in Steel Chronicle. Instead, we will be visiting the streets of Denver and an alternate starting point for a new group, including the transformation from humans to vampires, something we haven't seen since Blood Nativity back in episode 3. Join me next time when we sink our teeth into alien hunger. Until then, don't get lost in the labyrinth.